Right, very good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of West Berkshire Council. I'm Graham Pask, Chairman of Council. I'm supported this evening by my Vice Chairman, Councillor Hooker. I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting. I would also like to welcome those of you who are watching this meeting via live stream, and in particular would like to welcome those honorary aldermen and alderwomen who have joined us remotely. Now, all members are invited to participate in full council meetings. The council's chief executive, Nick Carter, and the executive directors, and if I may just pause there and welcome our new corporate director of place, Susan Halliwell, to her first meeting, are present to support members if required. I'm assisted this evening by Stephen Chard, who is acting as our Zoom host, and Linda Pye, who is clerk to the meeting. Now, members, it is my intention, if we're making good time, I'm dropping a little hint there, to allow a comfort break after discussion of the capital programme and before we start discussion on the revenue budget. I will now hand over to the monitoring officer, Sarah Clark, who will outline how the meeting will be conducted.
Thank you, Chairman. Standard Zoom reminders are now being shown on screen. In addition to those points, if it becomes necessary for any members to telephone into the meeting, you won't be able to signal to speak. So once everyone who has raised a Zoom hand has spoken, the chairman will ask anyone who has telephoned in to speak in the order he determines. Tapping in *9 can be used by those dialing in to raise their hands. Members, please note that you will be asked to vote on the minutes by means of raising your hands physically when asked if you approve the minutes. We will deal with all substantive motions that require a vote via a called vote. Each member then will be asked individually if they wish to vote for, against, or if they wish to abstain on an item. We will vote on any amendments by using an on-block vote by inviting the leaders to state how their group will vote. Individual members who wish to vote in a different way to their group will be afforded the opportunity to do so. With the exception of the revenue and capital items, the called vote outcome will not appear in the minutes. Anyone wishing for the vote to be recorded should therefore ask for a named vote before the vote is taken. 3 other members will need to support this by raising their virtual blue hand. If we need to adjourn the meeting at any point, the chairman will adjourn and will advise the council of the revised time and date of the meeting. If it is a short adjournment, you will be able to rejoin the Zoom meeting. Otherwise, a fresh appointment will be sent out. Members are reminded that as this is a full council meeting, members are only permitted to speak once on an item unless they are the proposer or unless they are raising a point of order or personal explanation. All members are permitted to speak for a maximum of 5 minutes unless they are advised otherwise. Linda Pye will notify anyone that is speaking when they have 30 seconds remaining. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark. Before we start the meeting, I'd like to take this opportunity to remind members that we are also subject to the Council's Code of Conduct, which requires us to uphold certain standards, including, importantly, respect. Members across the chamber may not always agree with one another, especially at budget time, but I would ask that in our disagreements, we endeavour to be respectful to other people's views. Now, members, we're approaching in early March a rather sad anniversary, and this year has been a very difficult and challenging one for many people in our community and here in West Berkshire. We've all been touched in some way by the COVID-19 pandemic. As we're reaching this rather sad anniversary of the start of the first lockdown, I'd like us all just to take a moment to reflect on the impact of the pandemic that it has had on all our lives. I'm sad to say that I believe the latest figure is we have lost 224 of our residents, which includes, particularly sadly, 2 members of our much loved members of our staff at West Berkshire Council. And I'm sure you will join me very much in sending our best wishes and our thoughts very much to the families, and indeed everyone in West Berkshire affected by the pandemic. I know a number of members of staff, and indeed some of you members, have also suffered from the effects of the virus. And let us hope that the light at the end of the tunnel for those of us who have had at least their first vaccination is getting ever nearer. So members, may I just ask that we have a minute's silence just to gather our thoughts and to remember those we have lost and who have suffered. Members, thank you. Item 1 on the agenda, apologies. Mrs. Clark, do we have any apologies?
Chairman, we have not received any apologies in advance of the meeting.
Okay, and does anyone know of anyone who isn't here? It's always difficult on 2 screens. Okay, thank you for that.
Chairman, I have taken a roll call, and I think the only person that I haven't seen is Councillor Jeremy Cottam. I don't know if Jeremy...
He's having problems with the link.
Yeah, he was at our pre-meeting. Okay,
well, let's hope he can join us shortly. Right, item 2, Chairman's remarks. As you would expect from the last meeting, my chain hasn't had a huge amount of use, but I'm very pleased to say I have done quite a lot of video work. In particular, prior to Christmas, we launched the Community Santa program and Giving Tree. A Giving Tree is for children of families who have suffered from domestic abuse. Both of those events were very well supported. Then again, prior to Christmas, we had the annual staff recognition event, which I hope all the chocolates now have been eaten, but it was a very good event. Our chief executive was the roving reporter, diving around all over the district, delivering good cheer and goodwill to all. And again, I think this is time to reflect that in the year, which, as I said before, has been particularly difficult, I'm very proud of our staff who have kept the wheels of the council turning, especially people who, for example, the refuse collection has been almost flawless, and people have worked incredibly hard at all levels of the council, and I pay a tribute to everybody who has made that possible. Culminating also as another award ceremony for our Community Champion Award. This was the best we've ever had, even though the format was, as you might expect, very different. Different from last year, where we had a very packed Shaw House. This year we had, from memory, over 90 people who were commended by their communities. It was a very hard job for any ranking of those. In fact, in my opinion, everyone who was nominated was a winner. But the whole ceremony was, I thought, transmitted on YouTube. And we had, as I said, a phenomenal response, and especially in the special categories, again, with the COVID theme, for those who have helped out in their communities in this difficult time. I would also just like to notify members that our annual related party forms have been posted to us today. The forms will have written guidance attached to assist you in completing the form, which will relate to the period from the 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of March, the end of this month, and need to be returned by the 12th of April. this year, of course. I now turn, members, to the minutes, and I would like to propose, this is the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of December 2020 as a true and correct record, and I would like to propose that they are. Does that find a seconder?
Chairman, I would like to second those minutes.
Thank you. Members, does anyone have any amendments they wish to raise at this time? In that case, could I please ask members to raise their hand if they support the approval of the minutes? Thank you, Mrs. Clark. Are you happy with that?
Thank you, Chairman. I confirm that vote has been carried.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to give my authority that my electronic signature is attached to these minutes. Members, declarations of interest. Mrs. Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. In respect of items 17 and 18, the Capital Strategy and Programme 2021 to 22 to 2023 to 24 and the Revenue Budget for 2021-22, all members have completed an application for a grant of a dispensation in relation to any beneficial interest in land within the authority's area. I have granted a dispensation to allow all members to speak and vote on this item. We've also received a number of personal interests which have been declared in relation to the aforementioned financial budget items, and they have been published on the Council's website and will be included in the minutes. I don't know whether any other members have any further interest that they wish to declare from the floor.
Right, members, do you have any interest you wish to declare? I think I am seeing none.
No, I can't see any either, Chairman.
Right, thank you. Petitions, item 5. Officers have not been notified that any petitions are due to be submitted. Members, do you have any petitions that you wish to present to the meeting? Again, Mrs. Clark, I see none. Do you?
No, I can see no indication.
Right, thank you very much. Item 6, public questions, and we have not received any public questions for this meeting. Membership of committees, Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to propose that Councillor Cottam is replaced on Eastern Area Planning by Councillor Keith Woodhams, and that Councillor Cottam then becomes a substitute member of that committee.
Okay. Thank you. We
you.
just note that, don't we, Mr. Clark?
No, Chairman, that this will need to be approved by Council. So right. I think we have a second.
Does that find a seconder? It does. Councillor Hunt, thank you very much. Again, a show of hands will be adequate, will it not?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Those in favour?
That vote has been carried, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Motions from previous meetings. Now, members, I would like you to note the responses to 6 motions set out in the agenda, which are tabled at previous council meetings. As the motions were discussed and responded to at either the executive or via delegated officer decision, we will not be revisiting the discussion on items A to D at this meeting. Item E will be discussed as a separate agenda item this evening, and the response to item F is included in the budget papers and can be discussed during that time. Now, I see 3 hands. Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, in terms of just the public being able to follow the documents, the individual motions are referenced on what date and what committee, but we could have just put a bit in there like we have done, to be honest with you, on item E, which only took up less than a paragraph in the agenda. I think members of the public would have been able to follow it. What I wanted to talk to the floor, Mr. Chairman, on was the fact of the length of some of these items and the fact that they haven't had debate within the council chamber. Now, all of these members tabled motions for full council to debate them and wanted to see what opinions of other members were. Yet, because of the referral process, they all go off into either part 2 meetings or meetings that are controlled by the administration rather than the council per se, as you as the chairman, and so then become debated within the political realm rather than the council debating chamber. And in particular, the item 8B from Councillor Eric Patterton, I believe that was the Safer Schools motion, which was originally tabled at last year's budget meeting, and it took till December for the executive to respond, and then only now for council to note it. We feel that council should be acting much more speedily in these papers, and that debate should be had, Mr. Chairman, before it gets deferred, so that the administration then has the view of all members when it makes its decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Councillor Vickers, Councillor Martha Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm echoing somewhat what Councillor Dillon has said. I'm referring to item F, which is a motion that was put forward in my name in December last, and which was then referred to the executive, and then now has come to this meeting. And later on, we'll see in the papers that it's been rejected with no debate. Meanwhile, breaking news today is that the government has actually accepted the content of this motion and that they will be making the £20 uplift to universal credit permanent. This is just breaking news on this evening's news. And what a shame that this council couldn't have been part of that lobbying process. Now, from where I'm sitting, the treatment that this motion has received, what I judge to be a timely motion that would receive cross-party support, I think it is disrespectful to the citizens' advice itself, to me as an elected councillor, and most importantly, I think it is very undemocratic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman. We do take issue with this. I'm not going to repeat so much of what was said before, but I brought a motion and it wasn't debated. It was referred to the executive. And here we have mine that is determined by a delegated officer decision, a decision I don't believe I received, but I will check. But surely that is not how this council should be run, when a motion by members is put down and it is, for what I believe are political reasons, passed down to officers to determine with no further discussion on it. It's a disgrace, frankly.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the motion in my name is indeed the Safer Schools motion that I brought to Council in March 2020, a year ago. So it's very disappointing, to say the least, that it's taken a whole year for the Council to now hear the response to it, and surely suggests that there's some serious issues with the democratic processes of this Council. Thank you.
Well, thank you for those comments. It's always a difficult decision as to know whether to take a motion on the night. I'm looking, Mrs. Clark, as monitoring officer, can you assist in the way in which these judgments are made, please?
I can, Chairman. I don't know whether you've noticed that we Councillor Adrian Abbs and Councillor Masters are also indicating a desire to speak.
Sorry,
so
I hadn't noticed that. I do apologise. They weren't there when I blocked them out with the chat box. I do apologise. Can I just put you on hold, Mrs. Clark? I will just take those two and then no more. Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. It's sounding a little bit like a broken record, but I do have a little bit. I do take note that we managed as a cross-party to get the motion that I first brought forward through. However, it did seem a little bit odd that it had to come again via a Conservative member before it was then taken to debate and treated seriously. That wasted 6 months, 6 months and 2 days, I think it was, because it was brought back just after the deadline from the first one expired, so it could be brought back. It just doesn't feel quite right. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Masters, the last word, then I'll go to Mrs. Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've got to say I wholeheartedly agree with the previous speakers from the Liberal Democratic Party. It seems that there's lots of talk from the Conservative group about cooperation and collaborative working, and that only extends to everybody falling in line with their their ideas and their motions. So there is a very big deficit in the democratic process on the council, and I wholeheartedly agree that we need to look at this as a council if we're going to have the confidence of the members of the public and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Mrs. Clark, can you advise the process, please, that we have
yes.
up to now?
Sorry, Chairman. So I confirm that the motions have been dealt with on each occasion in accordance with the Constitution, and the Constitution also reflects the legal framework which stipulates that certain decisions are by law reserved to the executive. So if a motion is submitted that it is relating to an executive decision, then that has to go to the executive for determination. And the Constitution permits those who submit motions to attend the executive to have that debate. What it means is that the debate doesn't take place in the council on the evening. So I think the framework is there. There is a Constitution Review Task Group, and I think these concerns have been raised previously, and they are being considered in that group.
And I think that is the appropriate group in which to consider the way in which these are dealt with in the future, as opposed to this evening. I do see 3 hands back up. I'm rather keen to move on with the budget, but in the interest of fairness, Councillor Vickers, Martha Vickers, that is, can you?
Well, just to say that the motion was referred to the executive, but it was not debated. So I can understand things have been referred onward to a decision-making body, the appropriate way, but it was not debated. I came to the executive meeting expecting a debate. I wasn't even informed before the meeting what the process would be. I began to speak and I was immediately told that this would be referred to the full council. So there was no debate. I didn't even speak. Although it had been seconded at the full council meeting, the seconder didn't speak. No one else had an opinion. So there was no debate. And I think that is the crucial point that we're putting forward, not where the matter is discussed, but the fact that there is no debate.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Masters.
Thank you, Chairman.
And
yeah, it's interesting that, you know, it's very difficult to get any motion to be discussed at full council. And, you know, when the Greens managed to get one debated at the last full council, it was described as divisive and was responsible for the tone of that meeting. It's almost like there doesn't want to be any scrutiny. Maybe if the council could consider in its constitutional reform group a committee-led council, and that way everything could be discussed by all parties in a proportional and representative manner, and then brought to full council to have the final the discussions.
Okay. Councillor Brooks, so you have the final word, then we will move on.
Thank you, Chairman. Mrs. Clark said that it's referred to executive for discussion, be brought back to executive, and yet I'm reading that this was a delegated officer decision on the 6th of January. So what it seems to me, I'd like to know what the outcome of those discussions was, because I don't think it's been published in the public domain. And this was about my motion that the SIL procedure should be reviewed. Now, unless I've blinked, I do not see the outcome having been publicly announced, but I still would urge the leader to look at these matters outside of a long constitutional review, Chairman. There are certain things that could be fixed very, very quickly, rather than months and months and months of the small print of the Constitution. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, okay, points are being made. Mrs. Clark, do you want to come back briefly? Because what I was going to say was that Councillor Martha Vickers' motion of the CAB can be debated tonight. Is that correct?
Yes, so the CAB motion forms part of the revenue budget proposal. So that can be debated at council this evening. And just for clarification, Councillor Brooks, the delegated offer decision matter is the speed limit review. The SIL matter has not been determined and will be, I believe, going to executive.
Well, I'm grateful for that. and it shows why if we'd put which motion it was on there, it would have been easier. Thank you.
All right. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to now ask you to note the information in the agenda relating to each of the committees listed in agenda items 9 to 14. I'm suggesting that we merely note these as they may or may not have met. Thank you. I see no hands, so I will move on to item 15, the investment and borrowing strategy, which is on pages 21 to 54 of the agenda. And I would ask Councillor McKinnon to present the report and formally move the recommendation.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm very pleased to propose that the Council adopt the investment and borrowing strategy for 2021 to 2022 and the revised version of our property investment strategy.
Thank you very much. And I believe, is it Councillor Wollaston to second this?
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to second and reserve my rights.
Thank you. Right, Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you again, Chairman. Okay, so this strategy really comes into two parts. It deals with investments and it deals with borrowing, sort of two sides of the same treasury management coin. We lay out the approved deposit institutions for our treasury investments. We'll deal with investments first. Sets prudential limits for those investments, which is basically how much we're going to put in one venue, as well as setting out approved sources of borrowing, recommending borrowing limits for the next 3 years and providing a long-term forecast for the Council's borrowing requirements. Let's deal with investments first. So the strategy authorises the Council to place deposits of excess cash in safe zones, basically UK government bonds, UK building societies and banks with sound credit ratings, other local authorities and AAA rated money market funds. The Council is also authorised to lend to registered charities, public sector bodies and council-owned companies and joint ventures. While we're dealing with investments, I'd like to talk now about the property investment strategy and the 2021 revision to that. That's at Appendix E to this report. Now, the significant change to the strategy is that the Council will no longer be seeking to make new purchases of commercial property. This is in line with revised guidance from SIPFA and MHCLG that Council should not borrow primarily for yield. The existing commercial property portfolio, £63 million, will continue to be managed by the Property Investment Board and its property advisors to provide income to support the revenue budget as it has done to date. On to borrowing. Paragraph 5.13 of the strategy details the approved sources of borrowing for the Council, including, of course, the Public Works Loan Board, but also the UK Municipal Bond Agency, banks and other institutions. PWLB rates have fallen back to more reasonable levels since last year, though it does remain the case, of course, that it may well be prudent to explore other borrowing sources if they turn out to be cheaper. The Council's external borrowing is kept under regular and close review to ensure that it's manageable and sustainable. I have heard questions in the past, at past budget meetings, I've only done one previous budget meeting, so that was last year, about the level of borrowings the Council undertakes, even to the extent of quantifying the total borrowing on a per resident basis. And that's all perfectly well. But remember that we're not using borrowed money to fund day-to-day spending. We're using borrowed funds to purchase assets, which benefit West Berkshire residents for the long term. It's a bit like buying a house with a mortgage. Yes, you have a big chunk of debt, but you can afford the repayments and you also have a house. Eventually you pay off the mortgage and you've still got a house and no debt. It's important to remember that principle. And if we quantify the debt per resident, we should really quantify the assets owned by the residents as well. One of the other organisations that enable local authority bond issues referred to in paragraph 513 is, of course, Abundance Investments, who facilitated the launch of the West Berkshire's UK first community municipal investment last July. This bond was a huge success and it reached its £1 million investment target early, enabling investors both inside and outside the district to invest directly in the Council's environment strategy. I'm really proud to have played a small part in such an innovative scheme. Now, I don't usually approve when members seek to bring national issues into the Council chamber, I've said that before, or spend too much time concerned with things outside of West Berks. However, as members are aware, there are two budgets this week. Obviously, tonight's is the most important one, but the Chancellor of the Exchequer is delivering the UK budget tomorrow. Now, believe it or not, I'm not in the Chancellor's inner circle, but there is a lot of speculation in public that national green bonds might be in his little red case. So if that does turn out to be the case, we can be very happy that where West Berkshire leads, the country follows. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Members, I invite any of you to wish to add to this debate to speak. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor McKinnon's saying he's a trailblazer with his bond then, and Mr. Sunak has been hanging on his every word. I think that's what he might be trying to infer there. The point, Councillor McKinnon, about the mortgage is interesting. And yes, there are reasons to borrow for infrastructure. I just think you're overdoing it. Because in the next 4 years, sir, the borrowing of the council is projected to go up by £50 million. And it will be over £1/3 billion by 23-24. Now, this is the sort of number that the public need to know and is buried away in lots and lots of pages here. And I'm bringing it out because although we will end up with the infrastructure, the public will end up with the debt, not you per se, although you are obviously a council taxpayer. And in the next year alone, Councillor McKinnon, the servicing of the increased debt is £525,000. So all I'm saying to you, sir, is you probably need to take your hand a little bit off your foot a bit off the accelerator here, as Mr. Sunak will be doing tomorrow, because necessarily he has had to borrow a lot for the pandemic. But in West Berkshire, this money is not being borrowed for the pandemic. It's largely for projects that the administration wish to do, and it's leading to ever-growing borrowing. And therefore, I'll finish with this, you become a hostage to fortune to interest rates. And I know you study these things, and so do I. There is concern about interest rates, there's concern about bond yields, there's concern about inflation, and you are trying to predict that you can manage the borrowing costs comfortably over the next few years. We will see. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't going to speak on this, but it was just Councillor McKinnon's analogy to like mortgaging a house. And whilst I do appreciate, Councillor McKinnon, you end up with the asset at the end, we aren't the tenant of the house. And we have tenants who have to pay us rent in order for us to cover our mortgage. It's a bit different from a homeowner living in their own home. And so just in relation to that, just a question, Councillor McKinnon. I think you probably agree that members of the public would be a bit disconcerted to see the annual rent for the sector at nil. And I just wondered if you wanted to give some explanation around that. I appreciate that it still, in terms of the whole asset portfolio, washes its face from a financing debt to income. But the risk that my colleague Councillor Brooks just spoke about is actually evident when you do look at for the sector, as it's an £8 million purchase price with no annual rent. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. I'm sure Councillor McKinnon will answer that question in his summing up. Councillor Pattenden.
Thank you, Chairman. Paragraph 5.2 states that the impact of coronavirus and Brexit will have a major influence on the Council's Treasury management strategy. Now, tonight's budget certainly makes clear the impact of coronavirus, but what has the impact of Brexit been on businesses and residents in West Berks since the 1st of January? For the last 2 months, the national press has had a huge amount of coverage of how of Brexit and the infamous oven-ready deal, and how these have seriously affected sectors like fisheries, arts and culture, and financial services. Now, as far as I know, there aren't many shellfish businesses in West Berks, but what aspects of Brexit have impacted the Treasury management strategy, and what's the scale of the impact?
Thank you. Councillor Masters.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to ask a couple of questions about the, firstly, Sector 4, I understand that it's been let to a capacity of about 30%, if Councillor McKinnon can confirm that. And I just wanted to know how long, because I think it was it's at least a year ago that I asked the question about its underutilization, and we were told, I think by Councillor Bennyworth, if I'm not mistaken, apologies if I am, where he said that we could last maybe a year, 18 months tops, without the income, without it becoming a major issue. But going back to the analogy of a mortgage and a household, would it not have been better to have invested the 8 million in some social housing, and we would have kept the property, and we would also have been getting rents from much needed social tenants?
Thank you. And Councillor Abbs is the last hand I see up.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I guess it's coming back to this analogy of property again. And actually, I agree with Councillor McKinnon that I would actually love to see an asset value against all of this investment, because certainly when I think about certain commercial property, it hasn't been increasing in value recently. It's been falling. So to see, what my underlying asset is now worth compared to what I paid for it would be very interesting to me. Then if I look at some of the other things that the capital is being spent on, software, hardware, and so on and so forth, these are generally declining assets, not growing assets. So yeah, I would encourage you please to publish the value of the assets against the initial investment. That would be very interesting.
Thank you. I see no more hands. Mrs. Clark, there's no one's phoned in, have they? Councillor Masters, is that an old hand or a new hand? You have spoken.
It's a new hand.
Well, I'm sorry. You have spoken once, and I'm afraid during a full council meeting you can only speak for once. So sorry, I can't allow you to have a second bite. So, Mrs. Clark, I was in the process of asking if you have anyone who's phoned in that you know of who hasn't indicated they wish to speak.
No, Chairman, all members are present in the Zoom meeting with full audio and video.
Good, thank you. I will always check just in case, because things can happen with technology. I will now come to Councillor Willison, who withheld his rights, and ask him to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to point out that debt costs in many cases is covered by the income, and a good example of that is the property investment portfolio. It is producing a net income to us of £700,000 a year. And I think someone raised the question of whether interest rates could come up. This is borrowed from PWLB, which is fixed rate money for 40 years. So the interest rates are not going to go up. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
That was very quick. Councillor McKinnon, you have the last word.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Brooks's submission, I followed it with great interest. I would point out to him, in addition to what Councillor Willison said about the PWLB being long-term fixed rates, absolutely correct. And the key figure, I mean, he focused on the total borrowing figure. I think you need to look at that in tandem with the percentage of the revenue budget that goes towards repaying the borrowing, the capital financing cost. That is 9% this year. It's going to be forecast to stay at 9% over the next 3 years in the MTFS. That is the dictionary definition of sustainable. And overall borrowing is forecast to come down from the levels that he suggested. He stopped about 2024, 2025. The long-term forecast for the council's borrowing is for it to decline after that point. But he's quite right to keep an eye on it, and I'm sure he will do in the future. In terms of for the sector, I'm bound a little bit, Councillor Dillon, by Part 2 and commercial confidentiality at this stage. So I'm limited in what I can say, other than to back up what Councillor Willison said, was that the benefit of having a geographically diverse portfolio of assets is that in the case of a vacancy or two, we're fortunate just to have the one vacancy. I think the phrase you used was washes its face, and I would agree with that. We're still generating a positive return to support the revenue budget. So I'm sorry I can't go into more detail on that at this stage. Councillor Pattenden, I do not want to get into a Brexit discussion. I thought we were beyond that. I would say that clearly the macroeconomic environment in terms of interest rate and inflation will be affected by how things all pan out. and that will clearly have an impact on the borrowing costs. I wouldn't be looking for the precise figure of anything. It's a macroeconomic factor rather than a specific issue to be dealt with there. And I think I'll leave that there, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. I will now hand over then to Mrs. Clark, who will take us through the vote. Mrs. Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I will now ask that members vote on the recommendation as set out on page 21 of the council agenda. I'll invite all members to unmute their microphones in anticipation of me calling through the names of the members in the meeting. And if members could indicate whether they are for, against, or whether they wish to abstain. So Councillor Adrian Abbs.
You're mute.
Councillor Abbs.
Councillor.
Could you come back to me in a moment, please, Sarah?
Okay. Councillor Steve Ardar-Walter.
For.
Councillor Peter Argyle.
For.
Councillor Phil Barnett.
Against.
Councillor Jeff Beck.
For.
Councillor Dennis Bennyworth.
For.
Councillor Dominic Bowick.
For.
Councillor Graham Bridgman.
For.
Councillor Jeff Brooks.
Against.
Councillor Jeff Cant.
For.
Councillor Hilary Cole.
For.
Councillor James Cole.
For.
Councillor Jeremy Cottam.
Against.
Councillor Caroline Culver.
Abstain.
Councillor Lee Dillon.
Against.
Councillor Lynn Doherty.
For.
Councillor Billy Drummond.
Against.
Councillor Clive Hooker.
For.
Councillor Nasser Hunt.
Against.
Councillor Gareth Hurley.
For.
Councillor Owen Jeffrey.
Against.
Councillor Rick Jones.
For.
Councillor Alan Law.
For.
Councillor Tony London.
For.
Councillor Royce Longton.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Ross McKinnon.
For.
Councillor Alan Macro.
Against.
Councillor Tom Marino.
For.
Councillor David Marsh.
Abstain.
Councillor Steve Masters.
Abstain.
Councillor Jeff Mays.
Abstain.
Councillor Andy Moore.
Against.
Councillor Graham Pask.
For.
Councillor Eric Pattenden.
Against.
Councillor Claire Rolls. For. Councillor Garth Simpson.
For.
Councillor Richard Sumner.
For.
Councillor Joanne Stewart.
For.
Councillor Martha Vickers.
Against.
Councillor Tony Vickers.
Against.
Councillor Andy Williamson.
For.
Councillor Keith Woodhams.
Against.
And Councillor Howard Wollaston.
For.
And coming back to Councillor Adrian Abbs.
Thank you for your patience. I was just starting a bit of a coughing fit, but against.
Thank you. Chairman, I can confirm that that motion has been carried.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark. Item 16, members, medium-term financial strategy, pages 66 to 72. Councillor McKinnon, if I can present the report and formally move it, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm very pleased to propose that the Council approves the medium-term financial strategy for the years 2021 to 22 to 2024 to 25.
Thank you. And the seconder, I believe, is Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm happy to second this paper, but I reserve my rights.
Thank you very much. Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you again, Chairman. The medium-term financial strategy is a rolling 4-year programme. It's built to ensure that the Council has the financial resources to deliver the Council strategy. It's a key element of effective financial planning. Now, like any 4-year forecast, it includes a number of assumptions and uncertainties around both income and expenditure. The local government finance settlement for 21-22 was broadly similar to the prior year, but we do await the outcome of really important factors that are going to feed into this 4-year period in the long run. The fair funding review for more long-term certainty about what's happening to business rates, adult social care funding, we're awaiting a green paper on that, new homes bonus replacement, capital funding and lots of other things. So there's lots of unknowns and what ifs and assumptions that feed into the income side of this forecast. In terms of expenditure, more assumptions, more uncertainty. We need to think about how our budget's going to grow, the base budget, what the pay inflation is going to be over the next 4 years, demand increases for those demand-led services like adult social care, children, family services, and so on, how much investment we're going to put in the council strategy, and again, others. You get the picture I'm trying to paint here. There's lots of uncertainties. Any 4-year forecast is going to be wrong. But that being said, it's a key element of effective financial planning, because these projections, uncertain as they are, based on those cumulatively, we're going to have to bridge a funding gap. We're going to have to find some savings of £13.2 million over the next 3 years, so not including this budgeted year, the final 3 years of the MTFS. Now, those savings will have to be met by transformation, digitisation, commercialisation. The council's got an excellent track record in delivering required savings, and in recent years, I'm delighted to say, without any cuts to frontline services. Now, it could turn out to be the case that our assumptions are on the pessimistic side, and the funding picture is more rosy than anticipated. Such is the nature of medium-term forecasting. And here's the key point. It's crucial that the council has adequate reserves in place to smooth what will undoubtedly be an irregular pattern of savings. Some of the assumptions will be wrong on the downside, some will be wrong on the upside. But we need to make sure we're protecting the provision of public services throughout this period. If we didn't do this exercise, if there was no medium-term financial strategy exercise conducted, and we were to budget just on a one-year basis, hand-to-mouth year after year, with a bare minimum of reserves, we'd be in a dreadfully precarious position if unexpected events were to occur or required savings proved temporarily unachievable. We'll see shortly, when it comes to the revenue budget, how beneficial it's been to have an adequate cushion of reserves in this COVID-affected year. It's only by carrying out a medium-term forecasting exercise that we can see the demands and challenges ahead and set our financial stall out accordingly to ensure that the council meets the needs of its residents. The medium-term financial strategy is vital to our continuing success and delivery of the council strategy. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Right, members, I have two hands already. Councillor Brooks, I believe you were first.
Thank you, Chairman. I can remember a time, and so will you, Chairman, when there was nothing called a medium-term financial strategy. In the 90s, it didn't exist, and we seem to muddle along, Councillor McKinnon, all right. So although it's a very useful planning exercise, it's only a key element in that planning if it's accurate, or as accurate as possible, and therefore within fairly tight parameters, you can review what you said you were going to do against what happened. And of course, I've said this more than once and at the last executive, and I don't think it would have taken long to drop a paragraph in of outcomes versus MTFS over the last 3 years. I'm sure that could have been done in the council papers I'm looking at following the executive papers, but it didn't appear. So we have 139.1 million on page 63 as the budget this year, and 139.8 next year, up to 144. I'll be watching those figures very carefully, as I've said to you before, because if you're way out, you have to start asking yourself, does this exercise help much at all? And if I can weave in a little bit of borrowing text and narrative here, Councillor Wollaston in the previous item said, don't you worry your pretty little head, or ugly little head, whatever he wants, about borrowing because it's all PWLB. Well, actually, on page 28, there's several other areas, sources for long-term borrowing, including banks, building societies, institutions for investments. So unless you're committing to PWLB, Councillor Wollaston, you were not being quite precise with your answer. And yes, Councillor McKinnon, I do appreciate that borrowing should level out and come back down later in this decade, partly because some of the old Berkshire County Council lag of borrowing will start to fall through. But again, you know, I believe it when I see it, but I do acknowledge the point, Councillor McKinnon. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Tony Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Just going to paragraph 1.1 of the papers made me think that it's all very well talking about a medium-term financial strategy for this council, but when you look through the papers, you find that about half, roughly half of our income, the money we spend, we're not in control of. And it's dependent upon national governments' long-term financial strategy for us in local government. I do sometimes feel we're like a child with a bad pair of parents who really don't know what they want to do with their children. You know, isn't it about time, Chairman, maybe Councillor McKinnon has a line direct to LGA, or even perhaps to Whitehall. What is going to happen in the longer term to local government finance? When are we going to get a proper settlement? We have a business rates that is simply not fit for purpose. We're treated like children and told what to do with other people's money rather than our own. And when we do collect money for the government, which is supposed to be on local government, they keep most of it and don't give it back. It's an appalling state of affairs, and it's very difficult for the public to understand. So have we got an answer anywhere in this medium term that we're looking at that the government will sort out the long-term financial strategy for us? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor McKinnon in his remarks said without having to cut any frontline services. I mean, I suppose there's a definition there, but certainly within the revenue papers, there are things like planning enforcement officers being cut, which I would class as a frontline service in that they're out there dealing with the constraints that we're putting in place as elected members and making sure that houses are being built to those standards. But that was just picking up on the line that Councillor McKinnon said. On the reserve levels, though, the Section 151 officer states that the Council's general reserve is forecast to be above the minimum level required by the Section 151 officer. And so my question, I suppose, to Councillor McKinnon is why should we hold on to more residents' money than what the 151 officer says is financially prudent?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dillon. I see no more hands. Councillor Bridgman.
Apologies, Chairman. My Zoom decided to play up on me. Chairman, thank you. Something I would simply say about the MTFS is clearly it is in large part an accumulation of individual service budgets, if not departmental budgets. And therefore, and I know as well as anyone with the adult social care portfolio that things fluctuate. Indeed, over the last year, they fluctuated astonishingly. And therefore, there will always be fluctuations in individual budgets going forward over the years, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to plan. You have to have forward planning in financial terms, in services, in departments. Otherwise, you can't do anything. You've got to plan that you're going to spend money on software, as we are at the moment, $500,000 on a particular piece of software over the next so many years. You've got to plan those things out. If in the end of the day they don't happen or something comes along to derail one aspect, doesn't mean you shouldn't have planned. So I fully support the concept of the MTFS, and I hope we all support financial planning. That is not to say I don't agree to a certain extent with Councillor Brooks that we then need to test what happened against the plan and learn better for the future. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman. Just checking, I see no more hands up. Therefore, Mrs. Clark, do I assume that we're still all present and no one has phoned in?
Yes, Chairman, I am not aware of anyone having phoned in.
Thank you very much. In that case, I turn to Councillor Doherty as the seconder. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chairman. When I stood before you last year to second our medium-term financial strategy, I did not know the horrendous year that would lie ahead of us as COVID took its hold and we as a council needed to respond to meet the needs of our residents through a pandemic. It's been a terrible year for many, and it has highlighted to me why sound financial stewardship is so critical when it comes to local government finance. You see, I do disagree with Councillor Brooks. I'm not prepared to just muddle through. For me, the MTFS is the key document in this evening's debate. It gives a clear and understandable message to us as decision makers on the actions that are needed to ensure the long-term financial sustainability of West Berkshire Council. Financial planning must sit at the heart of good public financial management, and never has that been more important than in this current year. So I am proud that this Conservatives administration's track record of this has enabled us to financially manage a very challenging year. I'd actually like to pause there and thank everyone who has been involved in that, both past and present, for enabling us to do so. The rest of this evening's papers cannot be and should not be debated and agreed without due consideration to the financial forecasting behind this paper. While I am sure we are about to hear from the opposition of the amendments they would like to make to both our revenue and capital spend, these cannot be considered in isolation and must link back to the impact they would have on the future financial stability of the council and the decisions that have already been reviewed as feasible and are proposed within our revenue and capital budget papers, decisions that have already been factored against their impact on this MTFS. Good ideas alone cannot be separated from financial forecasting. Any alteration proposed this evening would ultimately change the MTFS before you. I am happy to recommend the adoption of this MTFS, but before any further debates, I would echo Councillor Vickers' words and I would remind you all of the uncertainties as laid out in section 1.1 that we still face. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic will be felt for a number of years and is likely to change how public services are delivered in the long term. The government spending review that was announced in November 2020 was for a one-year period only. Councillor Vickers rightly asks, when will that change? And we have had the assurance from MHCLG that they are looking for a longer-term settlement in the forthcoming year. The Treasury has announced the much-awaited report of their review of business rates will now be published in the autumn. And there is currently an ongoing consultation with regards to a replacement for the new homes bonus. While I welcome the opportunity to keep any council tax low this year, this is done with the full understanding, with the absence of a longer-term financial package for local government, there still remains significant uncertainty over the financial position for 2022-23 onwards. This risk is something that has been taken into account and is considered at an acceptable level for the coming year in order to give residents relief from an additional increase at this difficult time. This risk takes into account our reserves position and maintains these at an acceptable level. Because I have confidence that this is a finely tuned budget that has given consideration to all these factors, I'm very happy to recommend this MTFS before you this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Finally, back to Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you to Councillor Doherty and indeed everyone who's contributed to the debate there. Muddling along, Councillor Doherty kind of beat me to it. In the 90s, Councillor Brooks, you referred to there was a very different decade, different colour of political administration in charge of the council at that point as well. The Conservative administration doesn't do muddling along. We do careful financial planning. Muddling along is what gets you in the 7 years to 2005, the last 7 years of the Lib Dem administration, a 53% increase in council tax. That's muddling along.
Central government. That was central government.
Of course, we didn't have referendum limits in those days. Results in 53% rises in council tax. And
I wish you'd been here.
So I'm afraid I can't agree with you on that score at all. Councillor Vickers, just to pick up on your point about not being in control of the majority of our finances, I'm a wee bit puzzled with that. 75% of our funding comes from council tax and the adult social care precept, which we are in control of the rates. I appreciate that there's a referendum limit, so I don't know if you're saying you want to go above the referendum limit again and go back to the 90s in that regard too. And finally, just to come back to the point about the reserves level, it's an important point, Councillor Dillon, that you raised, and you will come to it in the revenue budget as well. You missed out an important word though, and it isn't important. I'm sure you didn't do it deliberately, but the Section 151 officer recommends the minimum recommended reserve. It's not the recommended level of the reserve, it's the recommended minimum. And yes, we're going to see we're a touch above that when we come to the revenue budget. But if you go, again, it goes back to this budgeting hand to mouth, the lack of a medium-term plan. If you go year to year, just absolutely bang on that minimum level of reserves, it only takes one bad year and boom, you're way below it. And then you're in a lot of trouble. So no, I make no apology at all for having a little bit of a cushion above that minimum level, but I'm sure it's something we'll come back to when we come to the revenue budget. Thank you very much.
On a point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me, I've had my hand up waiting for that point of order, Councillor Dillon.
Okay,
Councillor Doherty first, then Councillor.
Thank you. Chairman, I was actually going to ask on a point of order, it might be worthwhile reminding members that there isn't heckling when people are speaking. We give them the courtesy of listening as they would expect to be listened to, and not interrupting when they are actually responding. And if somebody wishes to raise a point of order, they should raise their Zoom electronic hand, has been sent to all members. And actually the reminder that you have one opportunity to talk to this on a debate, rather than keep coming back for a second bite of the cherry. So I just wanted to raise those points of order with you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. You actually beat me to it, but thank you indeed for reminding us. Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just a point of order on Councillor McKinnon referencing the previous Lib Dem administration and the lack of an MTFS. I think it's actually SIPFA guidelines that required the MTFS, and I don't think that they were applicable when we were in power. So, Ross, let's be fair. You're doing what you're required to by SIPFA. Not everything that comes out of here is the genius of a Conservative councillor, but is because of regulation. And if we would have had to have done one of those in the 90s, then we would have complied and done one in the 90s as well. But I'm proud that, and without diverting too far, I wasn't a member of the council back in those days. I was a resident of West Berkshire Council.
Is this a point of order, Councillor Dillon? So
sorry, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the point of order was referencing MTFS. Only, yeah, sorry, it was referencing the MTFS. Having not done one. You made
the point.
Yeah, when the guidelines say we don't.
You made the point, but yeah. I have Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman.
Point of order only, I hope.
Absolutely. I think it's a point of order that I shouldn't be able to be muted by the host. And in the council chamber, I wouldn't be able to be muted. And in the council chamber, the odd remark against the council chamber helps the meeting move forward. So if we want a sterile meeting, Chairman, where nobody is able to make any remark at all unless they're called, this is the way we're going about it. But it's not been the case, Chairman, with your chairmanship over many years. So let's not take advantage of Zoom to actually change the rules.
Okay, you made the point. Right, hang on, I've got lots of hands going up here and I'm getting a little wary. Councillor Councillor McKinnon, is that a new hand?
Sorry, old hand, Chairman.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to point out to Councillor Brooks that we are in a very different environment from the chamber. When Councillor Brooks interjected, that was all that I could hear, and I think it's completely inappropriate in this environment.
Right. Thank you. You've made the point, and I'm going to say to all of you, I'm doing my utmost on Zoom, which is still, despite having had it for a year, quite an alien environment. One of the joys of sitting on the dais and looking in the nicest possible way down upon you is I can see Councillor Brooks' knee going. I can see exactly when he's going to interject. I can see your body language. I can't see that on Zoom. It does make it a tricky environment. I will always endeavour, as you know, Councillor Brooks, and many of you all will know, that I will always try to conduct the meeting fairly. But it's a tricky one, so do bear with us. But I did say at the beginning, I do hope that we do give due respect to each other in everything we say. It wasn't flippant when I said inevitably there will be difference of opinion, and we can indeed respect that difference of opinion, can't we? I'm going to go to the vote and hand over to Mrs. Clark again.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can again invite all members to unmute their microphones, and I will go down the list in order to take a vote. If members can indicate for, against or abstain. Sorry, Chairman, I've just seen Councillor Bowick's hand is up. I don't know if that's his old hand.
I think it's an old hand.
Okay, sorry. So I will
pardon the expression.
So, thank you. So Councillor Adrian Abbs.
Abstain.
Councillor Steve Ardar-Walter.
For.
Councillor Peter Argyle.
For.
Councillor Phil Barnett.
Abstain.
Councillor Jeff Beck.
For.
Councillor Dennis Bennyworth.
4.
Councillor Dominic Bowick.
4.
Councillor Graham Bridgman.
4.
Councillor Jeff Brooks.
Abstain.
Councillor Jeff Cant.
4.
Councillor Hilary Cole.
4.
Councillor James Cole.
4.
Councillor Jeremy Cottam.
Abstain.
Councillor Caroline Culver.
Abstain.
Councillor Lee Dillon.
Abstain.
Councillor Lynn Doherty.
4.
Councillor Billy Drummond.
Abstain.
Councillor Clive Hooker.
4.
Councillor Nasser Hunt.
Abstain.
Councillor Gareth Hurley.
4.
Councillor Owen Jeffrey.
Abstain.
Councillor Rick Jones.
4.
Councillor Alan Law.
4.
Councillor Tony London.
4.
Councillor Royce Longton.
Abstain.
Councillor Ross McKinnon.
4.
Councillor Alan Macro.
Abstain.
Councillor Tom Marino.
4.
Councillor David Marsh.
Abstain.
Councillor Steve Masters.
Abstain.
Councillor Jeff Mays.
Abstain.
Councillor Andy Moore.
Abstain.
Councillor Graham Pask.
4.
Councillor Eric Pattenden.
Abstain.
Councillor Claire Rolls. 4. Councillor Garth Simpson.
4.
Councillor Richard Sumner.
4.
Councillor Joanne Stewart. 4. Councillor Martha Vickers.
Abstain.
Councillor Tony Vickers.
Abstain.
Councillor Andy Williamson.
4.
Councillor Keith Woodhams.
Abstain.
Councillor Howard Wollaston.
4.
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that that recommendation has been approved.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark. Right, item 17, we're doing well. Capital Strategy and Programme 2021-22 to 23-24, which is on pages 73 to 122. Now, I'm going to explain, before moving on to the Capital Strategy and Programme, the rules of debate for this item, which have been agreed with all group leaders. Firstly, I shall ask Councillor McKinnon to present the report and move the recommendations. Councillor McKinnon will be permitted to speak for up to 5 minutes before the motion has been seconded by Councillor Bowick. I'll then ask Councillor Brooks to speak, and he will have up to 5 minutes to speak on the motion, including introducing his amendment. This will be seconded by Councillor Dillon, who will also have up to 5 minutes. Councillor Brooks' amendment will then be debated and voted on. I'll then ask Councillor Marsh to speak, and he will have up to 5 minutes to speak on the motion and introduce his amendment. This, I'm told, will be seconded by Councillor Culver, who will also have up to 5 minutes. Councillor Marsh's amendment will then be debated and voted on. Following that vote, the debate will return to the motion or the substantive motion, which will also be voted on. All portfolio and shadow portfolio holders will have up to 5 minutes to speak. All other members will have up to 2.5 minutes to speak. The monitoring officer will announce prior to the vote being taken on the motion and any amendments proposed, and we are required to record the names of members voting for and against the budget proposals in accordance with the local authorities, brackets, standing orders, close brackets, brackets England, close brackets, brackets amendment, close brackets, regulations 2014. That's a statutory instrument, 2014/165. And this came into effect on the 25th of February 2014. So unless members have any objections, the votes will be recorded en bloc when voting on the amendments, albeit that individual members are able to notify that they wish to vote in a different way, and we will use a named vote for the substantive motion. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Councillor McKinnon. You have up to 5 minutes to present the report and formally move the recommendation. Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm delighted to propose the capital strategy for the next 3 years. Specifically, the capital strategy, minimum revenue provision policy, asset management strategy, flexible use of capital receipts policy, and the proposed use of SIL bids for inclusion in the capital programme be approved. Chair, would I stop now for a second, or do I continue for 5 minutes?
Well, I will ask if that is formally seconded. Councillor Burke?
Sorry, Chairman. Yes, I formally second Councillor McKinnon's proposal, and I reserve my rights.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks, Chairman, for the guidance. Okay, yes, delighted to propose the capital programme for the next 3 years. This administration proposes an investment in infrastructure of £123 million over the next 3 years, investing to make sure that West Berkshire remains a great place to live, work, learn, be healthy as well. We're talking about recent developments, and to coin a phrase, to build back better from the unprecedented challenges of the past year. The capital programme provides substantial investment across the Council's 6 priorities, but specifically selected highlights: £40 million invested in the People Directorate, 36 million of which in education services, providing new schools for our children, as well as new facilities, extensions and refurbishments to existing schools. £12 million in highways improvement schemes, keeping West Berkshire residents and businesses moving smoothly when we do finally go back to work. There are also railway station improvements, cycle path and walking route upgrades too. £13 million in our environment strategy projects, including £10.5 million in a 75-acre solar farm, producing enough cheap, clean energy to power over 4,000 homes, as well as large-scale afforestation projects, amongst others. £3.5 million for occupational therapy equipment, a vital and essential aids and equipment for vulnerable people. £900,000 to introduce separate food waste collections across the district. That's going to reduce the food waste that's disposed of in black bins and improve our excellent recycling rates still further. £500,000 allocated directly to community groups from our pilot scheme to top slice and accelerate SIL payments to fund infrastructure improvements such as village hall refurbishments, playground renovations, environmental enhancements and improved sports facilities. The successful bids come from across the district and will provide much needed infrastructure funds to get these projects up and running as soon as possible. This capital programme doesn't just maintain essential services, but it invests in new schemes across all of our council strategy priorities. Of course, the capital programme must be sustainable and affordable. £53 million of the 3-year programme is funded from external sources like central government grants and Section 106 and SIL payments. That leaves £69 million to be funded by capital receipts and, of course, borrowing. I would reassure members and residents again that capital financing costs are only 9% of the revenue budget and are forecast to remain so throughout the 4-year period of the MTFS. The Section 151 officer is required to confirm that this programme is prudent, affordable and sustainable, and he has done just that. Overall, this capital programme strikes just the right balance between new investment to support our council strategy priorities, continuing to fund core infrastructure, and of course, overall affordability. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Right, as I outline now, I turn to Councillor Brooks, who has up to 5 minutes to speak to the motion and including introducing his amendment. Councillor Brooks.
I won't need 5 minutes, but I'll start off by saying I take your point, Chairman, about the world of Zoom and remarks. And oh, can we get back to a 3D world anytime soon, please?
I couldn't agree more.
You give me a little bit of latitude in the council chamber. I shall look forward to that. Meanwhile, the capital budget. There will always be things in any administration that we would wish to support. And this will not be different. And therefore, wouldn't it be nice if we could support your capital budget if you could support the 2 things that we would like you to add to it? A very simple one in terms of Thatcham Library, expanding its reception and providing a disabled toilet, £30,000. Nothing too harsh to ask for the Thatcham Library. And then a larger amount, but something to get community football being played again in the centre of Newbury. And therefore, by doing some remedial work to the Faraday Road football area, the ground, so that community groups could use it. And I know my leader, Councillor Dillon, will speak more on that in a moment. So there you have it, Councillor McKinnon. If you were able to take on board these 2 points, you might be surprised at how much unanimity you might have on this capital budget. We will see. Thank you, sir.
Councillor Brooks, thank you. I should have asked if that was seconded. Councillor Dillon, I believe you are.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I reserve my right.
Thank you. In that case, I see Councillor Tony Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. I haven't got a great deal to say. I do want to speak on the Amendment A, the large spend. As is well known to members and I think to the public, we are not in favour of the administration's plans to move football out of this area. We are not absolutely committed either to reinstating it precisely on the existing site. But we do believe that our preferred option would be to keep it somewhere in central Newbury, probably in the council-owned estate in the London Road area. But in the interim, we just want to see some football taking place in the centre of our town. We think that the administration's plans to create this sort of unwanted recreational facility are amiss. We think that the excursion up to the rugby club, whilst it may provide a football facility, is nowhere like the like-for-like replacement that we believe football in this town deserves. I was recently taking my daily exercise in Hungerford, and I hadn't actually ever seen the Hungerford Football Club ground. It is far better for a town that is only about a fifth the size of Newbury than anything Newbury has had since I lived here. And when you look at, I was only hearing on the radio that Stroud, a town similar in size to Newbury, is rebuilding or building itself a new stadium at zero carbon level. Now, what we on the Liberal Democrat side want to see in the London Road Industrial Estate is a redevelopment at zero carbon standards, something really ambitious, not just purely for revenue, but it would include a football facility somewhere on that area that would be a beacon for how such multi-purpose mixed-use areas in a town centre should be. So we are putting what is no more than I think the council has wasted on trying to find alternative solutions to football by allowing the football ground to at least get no worse and perhaps be partially reinstated to what it was at the time that the lease on the football club ended. So that's what I can say in support of that part of our amendment, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, on the capital side, I don't have too much to say, but I'll give you a little bit of background first. My day job is in IT. So when I look at a capital strategy, a budget that it contains knocking on the door of £5 million dedicated towards IT, I'm going to ask questions. So I did ask questions. And I have to say I'm always somewhat disappointed by the lack of evidence produced to say that this 5 million is being spent in a prudent way that will actually lead to a return on investment. Now, IT can absolutely deliver better ways of working. Some would argue for and against Zoom, but it's...
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Law, point of order.
Yes, I think Councillor Abbs seems to be talking to the substantive motion, not the Lib Democrats amendment.
I am, yes. Thank you for that point. So I shall wait for later then. That's just fine.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Law. Very good. Councillor Pattenden.
Thank you, Chairman. With libraries coming under my shadow portfolio, I'm very pleased that we're bringing forward this amendment to provide an upgraded reception area and disabled toilet for Thatcham Library. For members that have never been there, these upgraded facilities are going to make a huge difference to library visitors. In normal times, Thatcham Library gets over 3,000 visitors a month. It saw an increase of new members of 19% in 2020. It works with the Central Family Hub. They run weekly groups for the under fives and for adults. The building has got some facilities for disabled visitors, including an access ramp, and it's got level access throughout. But at the moment, if a disabled person wants to use the toilet, they've got to get themselves to Thatcham Broadway. Now that's probably a 10-minute walk for an able-bodied person. Also, a remodeled reception is going to provide much better and safer access for all visitors. So therefore, I'm pleased to recommend this amendment to all members. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would like to speak on the two Liberal Democrat amendments, which I and my Green colleagues wish to support. I'm pleased to say that we do so. To take the simpler one first, I became involved in local politics partly because of the previous administration's closure of my local library at Wash Common and a decision to sack half the librarians in West Berkshire, all in the name of a now completely discredited austerity policy promoted by the then government. One of the themes of our amendments tonight in this part of the budget and in the revenue part is to put something back to help those areas that were hit by those cuts. And the amount that is being proposed here for Thatcham Library is a modest amount that seems to me entirely justified and easily fundable. Now, on the football ground, we strongly support this and we feel that it complements our own capital proposal, which we'll be discussing in a short time. It's 2.5 years since the decision, which everyone must now realise was a premature and a mistake. 2.5 years since hundreds of footballers, including a lot of kids who played football there regularly, were kicked out of Faraday Road. We'll talk about, I hope, I shall certainly touch on the plans for the rugby club in a little while, but in terms of this amendment, it is time to get people back on that pitch. The recreation ground that is proposed has come from nowhere. There's no demand for it. It's right next door to a park. Please listen to this. There is, those of you who don't live in Newbury, who don't know Newbury, there is no demand for that facility. Now, so let's have football there. And then if you accept our amendment, then we'll get football back at Faraday Road permanently instead of a speculative venture to possibly build flats on there at some time in the distant future that has been on the table for years and nothing has come of it. Let's get the footballers back. Let's get the football ground back. But even if you don't support our amendment to get football back there permanently, this still makes sense. There's no point in providing a facility that people don't want. We know there's a demand for people to play football at that site. It could be done quickly with spending less. This proposal by the Liberal Democrats spends less than what you want to spend on turning it into the unwanted recreation ground. So please, thanks to the good officers of Councillor Bridgman, Conservative backbenchers have been given the opportunity to demur from the traditional block vote of opposing everything that every other party puts forward. You do have a chance here to say this proposal makes complete sense and the proposal for a recreation ground does not. So I really hope that one or two people will at least recognise that fact. And let's have a proper democratic decision on what you actually think, not how you're told to vote by your executive. So please support these amendments and hopefully support ours in a short while. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll take the one that everybody's saying is relatively easy to start with regards to the suggestion for Thatcham Library. And while it may be a good suggestion, there's actually a complete library review planned for this coming financial year. And I think to make any assumptions of its findings at this point, in my view, would be premature. So I think that certainly needs to feed into that library review, the thoughts and comments there, and no issue with that whatsoever. But I do think it needs to be part of the total process that can be looked at as a whole. With regards to the 300k for the reopening for community use of the London Road Industrial Estate football pitch, I don't consider 300 for a short period of time a sensible option, given the cost would be for a limited period of time, as the council's just approved the development brief for the area and this land is included. Although I'm now slightly confused because Councillor Vickers is talking about moving the football pitch from the original place as well. So that's a new one this evening. I have to reiterate that this council remains committed to the regeneration and redevelopment of London Road Industrial Estate, and therefore it's not prepared to take any action that might potentially jeopardise those plans, including renewed single sports occupation and management of the former LRI football ground. The council has proposals that will allow the old grass pitch site to be used for general public enjoyment until the area is required for redevelopment. And where those proposals maintain the council's control of the asset, thus ensuring freedom of action as and when the land is needed for redevelopment. subject to the council obtaining the necessary planning consent. In addition, I find the comments about demand and community football in the centre of Newbury quite interesting. I would ask Councillor Vickers perhaps to go, I know he's a great fan of walking, try walking to Speen Recreation, try walking to Donington, because we see community football in action all the time. I actually refute the idea that prior to 2018, that there was lots of children, as Councillor Marsh referred to, using that pitch, because I was actually actively involved within community football at that time, and at no point were the children invited to play on that actual area. And actually, the last tenant of the old football ground, Newbury Football Club, has successfully carried on playing at another venue supported by the council, and there is an agreement that these arrangements can remain in place until delivery of the new facilities. So none of, so the demand that is talked about has not actually been seen. And in fact, we've actually offered to assist anybody that is looking for a ground. We've asked them to come forward to the council, and we will give them that support to find a ground should they need it. So far, that offer has not been taken up by anyone that suggests to me that the demand is not there. For those two reasons, for those two amendments, I'm actually recommending refusal on both accounts, because I think there's still work to be done with regards to the library review, and I disagree with the position with regards to the London Road and Industrial Estate, because I want to prioritise jobs and the local economy in that particular area.
Thank you. And finally, I have Councillor Cottam.
Thank you, Chairman, very much indeed for letting me speak. I'd like to speak to the library improvement subject. Thatcham Town Council dug deep to help with Berkshire Council with the revenue. It was a lot of money for them, and they've stumped it up and stood firm and even offered long-term support for this. So I'm disappointed that when they asked for help from West Berkshire Council, that is just put aside. I'm sorry, it's really not good enough. It's a little thing to ask for, £30,000, which will actually give some builders some work. So it might even help stimulate the economy locally. It's, we're looking for some reciprocation to the town council for this. The library review, that could take years. This could be done quickly, easily, benefit the disabled of our community, make it a much more pleasant place to go to, and much easier access for the disabled. So I would please ask that the leader of the council review that and actually come forward and put a small amount of money into Thatcham, because Thatcham has invested heavily in keeping the revenue cost, which is the most important, so we can keep it open. I don't think it's unfair to ask this small amount. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cottam. I see no further hands up, so I'm going to defer to Mrs. Clark to go, just for consistency, to go to each group leader to establish what the vote is.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I seconded. Oh, my right.
I do apologise, Councillor. My humblest apologies.
No, absolutely fine, Mr. Chairman. And I hopefully won't talk too long. If we start on the library one, so I appreciate the leader is saying that there's going to be a review of the library service, but you heard in the proposals from Councillor Patterton about the length of distance someone who's disabled has to walk. I believe that this was looking at having an external access point as well, so it would benefit the wider community.
Chairman, point of order. Shall we wait for Councillor Burke to return? Oh, he's now returned. Thank you.
You gone? Right. Sorry, do carry on, Councillor Dillon.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This will deliver benefit for the residents of Thatcham and visitors of Thatcham, as well as library service users. And for a 30,000 capital investment that we raised with the library service, I think back in the autumn, we were not told at the town council that it would be that there would be a library review coming up, and it would be based around the outcome of that. My concern from the leader of council saying that we need to wait for the review is, does that mean there's the potential that Thatcham won't have a library? Because if we do have a library, and I would always expect there to be a disabled toilet there. So really, we're just asking for West Berkshire Council to bring its assets up to what anybody would deem to be suitable. On the second one, on London Road Football Club, I think Councillor Marsh, and thank you from the Greens for supporting this, and Councillor Vickers spoke on it eloquently. You are wasting money by having a car park and an open space. You are spending money on that. So instead of spending 100 grand on that, why don't you spend a bit more? Works out at £2 per person. And I'm sorry, Lynn, but that is the cost of failure. When you get something wrong, you have to put it right. And in this case, it's going to cost £2 per resident to guarantee that we can play football in the centre of the town until the land is actually needed. And you've been premature on releasing the land. And because of that, you have you've robbed the town of a football club. You say that the previous team have successfully relocated to the back end of Beyond with no income source that they would be able to generate when they were based at the rugby club site. But it's quite clear that you're adamant that you're not going to correct previous mistakes. And even worryingly, and we put it in our motion about the moral ability of this council to follow planning guidance and policies, and about re-provisioning, and you should not evict tenants until you have re-provisioned, and that's what Sports England suggests as best practice, and that's what we were hoping that our amendment would have seen the council doing tonight if it had been voted on. I think that's enough, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to move to the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. And just for information, Councillor Abbs, I did give you the opportunity to speak. We are now in the closing order of speaking, so I'm sorry I cannot permit you to speak now. Councillor Brooks, you were the mover of the amendment, so I do allow you, of course, to speak.
Grateful for that, Chairman. I won't take up too much time. No unanimity on this one tonight, Councillor McKinnon, I fear. Because these two proposals are being voted down, it would seem. Very much a yes minister type answer. We're going to do a whole review, Minister, of libraries, and we'll have a good look at that in the fullness of time. But in fact, what we were looking for on the library was action this day, which was a regular statement from Winston Churchill during the war. But no such action this day will be taken, and it will be kicked into the long grass of a library review. I won't rehearse any more of the points on the football club. Safe to say that playing at Hennick Field is hardly where a Newbury football club ought to be playing, frankly. But we will, on this matter, agree to disagree. We will abstain on the substantive motion on the capital budget, because while I started by saying there will always be things in there we would want to support, you just couldn't see yourselves able to support one or two things we wanted you to adjust. So that's my summation, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. And before we go to the vote, of course, the executive member does have the final word on this, so Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you, Chairman. I fully support everything that the leader just said. I think she gave very reasonable explanations for both amendments, and I concur wholeheartedly. That's all, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that. Now we've got back into the right place. I will hand over to Mrs. Clark to go to each group leader. Mrs. Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. So I will go to each of the group leaders in turn and ask them to indicate how their group wishes to vote on block. And then I will ask members, all other members, to indicate if they wish to give a contrary indication to that indicated by their leader. So can I start with Councillor Lynn Doherty for the Conservative group?
Against.
And Councillor Lee Dillon for the Liberal Democrat group?
For.
And Councillor Caroline Culver for the Green Party?
For.
And can I ask if any member disagrees with the vote indicated by their leader? I'm just looking along that list. I know, Chairman, for the minutes that Councillor Rolls has had had some difficulties, technical difficulties. So I'm going to record Councillor Rolls as having abstained from this vote, but I can confirm that that motion has been refused.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark. We now come to the Green Party amendment. I'm going to ask Councillor Marsh to speak to the motion, including his amendment. I will, if you could just introduce it, please, Councillor Marsh, and I'll ask Councillor Culver to second it, and then I will come back to you for your 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'd like to propose the Green Party amendment with the deletion of those words from the current draft budget.
Thank you, Councillor Culver.
I second, Chairman. I'll reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'm sure Councillor McKinnon will be pleased to know that we support his the playing pitch strategy, and Councillor Wollaston will no doubt welcome that. We think that these pitches, these 3G pitches, are long overdue. In fact, it's rather a shame that it's taken this long to provide them. They're needed across the district, and that includes not just Newbury, but it includes the east of the district, which has a great need for these football facilities. But so 5 million plus over the next few years on these pitches is a great idea. But wait, hang on a minute. The first tranche of this just happens to be the amount that is being earmarked for the pitch, the new proposed sports ground at the rugby club at Wash Common. And incidentally, it's an absolute scandal that the council leader has told me in a question I put to the executive a couple of weeks ago that we will have no chance to debate this. In fact, the next few minutes are the only chance, so far as I can tell, that members of the council, never mind members of the public and local residents, have any chance to have their say about this proposal. Now, we're not against the football pitches, we're against putting it at Wash Common. There's a deeply flawed consultation exercise that's been carried out, which doesn't conform, so far as I can tell, to the government's consultation code at all. We don't think that the pitch or the facilities at the rugby club are a like-for-like replacement for the existing football ground. It's not popular with local residents. They have a lot of fears about the effect of traffic. There's a proposed car park costing an absolute fortune. I'm not allowed to say how much, apparently, because it was in part 2 of the executive papers and the public aren't supposed to know about it at this stage. But let me say, it is an eye-watering amount of money for a car park that will not be adequate. And understandably, my local residents in Wash Common are very concerned about the effect of that on traffic and parking in the area. It seems wrong to me that 9 people should decide this issue without any chance for anyone else to have any say, not least because, and this is getting back to the budget, it's pure financial madness. It will be a drain on council taxpayers for years. The figures that were put into part 2 and passed by the executive envisage a lot of money being spent on paying for that ground for years to come, including every year it's in use, a very large rent to the rugby club. Now, the council owns Faraday Road. There's no need to pay rent. It would cost less to run Faraday Road and if refurbish Faraday Road, which is what we're proposing. It would bring in revenue. It would pay for itself. It would make a profit in a way that it will never happen at Monk's Lane. And it's capable of expansion, quite rightly. I mean, never mind Stroud or Hungerford, Thatcham could not play at that Wash Common ground, and there is no scope to expand it so that they could, because they're in too high a league of football. So what chance have Newbury ever got if they advance through the leagues? It's completely unsuitable, and there's no credible alternative either. All this because of what I described earlier as a speculative venture that may or may not happen, that's become a sort of totemistic policy for the successive Conservative administrations. We're going to build flats on Faraday Road, and the consultants are not allowed to consult about that. The public are not allowed to have their say about it. The council members certainly aren't allowed to debate about it. And incidentally, that includes Conservative backbenchers. If you're not on the executive, you don't get a say. This seems completely wrong. And despite all this, everything that's gone on, we're no nearer getting flats on that football ground at Faraday Road than we first were when Councillor Frederickson told us how great it was going to be years and years ago. It's a complete fiasco. So we're offering you a way out of this. We really are. We're trying to be constructive here. Vote for our amendment. At the very least, you're keeping open that possibility, restoring the possibility of using
30 seconds. 30
30
seconds.
Take more time. Please urge your executive members to stop this crazy rush that has not been thought through and planned properly to Monk's Lane. You know perfectly well, everyone knows, everyone says it in and out of the council. Faraday Road, LRIE has been a complete cock-up from start to finish. This is a chance to start putting it right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Masters.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to echo Councillor Marsh's words and say that it seems we go from one financial spend and wasting money on legal fees and a relocation, and it seems that the administration are incapable of putting their hand up and saying, okay, we got it wrong, let's work collaboratively. There's lots, as I said earlier in the meeting, there's lots of talk on this administration about working together. And we've heard two offers and suggestions of how we can be more fiscally responsible for the rate council taxpayers of and the sporting public and the youth football groups, etc. But it falls on deaf ears, and it seems that this is a hill that the Conservative administration, seem willing to defend and die on for no good reason. It's just a folly. It seems bad decisions after bad decisions are being made. Starting with the premature closure of the football ground over 2 years ago, and all they have to do, put their hand up and say, right, let's wipe the slate clean and start again. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Councillor Tony Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I can really do no better than to read out, in case people haven't got it in front of them, the words against the reason for the Greens amendment, which we shall be supporting on the Liberal Democrat side. The proposals for a new ground at Newbury Rugby Club are sketchy, badly thought out, and will be a drain on council resources for years to come. Now, there will be a public debate on this because it's a council, when it comes to planning, it will be a council applicant, presumably, and therefore it will have to come to Western Area Planning. Now, in the unlikely event that I am persuaded to pass to give it planning consent, I can't imagine that it won't be called in by Sport England, because no way, if the council persists in considering this as a like-for-like replacement for Faraday Road, which is its whole justification for doing it, then it will be called in. And, it's then out of our hands, isn't it? Yet another decision that is taken out of West Berkshire Council's hands, but rightly so in this case. So whilst I would welcome a pitch of this sort up at Monk's Lane, I don't see that the plans of this council are going to come to anywhere. So everything spent on that proposed move is actually a waste of our money, if that's the purpose. So I'm all in favour of spending the same amount of money on reinstating the current facilities at Faraday Road. That would be preferable, although we as a Liberal Democrat group are not committed to exactly the same solution as the Greens. We believe that more work is done to do site investigations in the Faraday Road area. But this is a total waste of money by the administration, and we therefore support the Greens in their proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Greens, for Councillor Marsh, for your amendments. We disagree. We disagree that there is no suitable replacement. I've already stated in my response to the Liberal Democrats amendments that we don't believe that this is the right thing to do. We disagree, but we're not prepared either. I listened to Councillor Marsh, and on the one point he's telling me I've got a flawed consultation. That consultation is still ongoing. We're getting the reviews back in, we're hearing from the public, we're listening to what they have to say. So for him to ask me at this point to put through an amendment or support an amendment where I am in the middle of a consultation process, for me again is premature. We need to make sure that we do follow that through, because or else I have Councillor Marsh telling me how flawed it is. Councillor Masters talks about there is no good reason. Well, I disagree. I fundamentally disagree with that statement. And the reason I disagree with that is because I have made in no uncertain terms do I think that the London Road Industrial Estate regeneration should go ahead. Because if you ask me, will I prioritise jobs for local people and supporting our local economy over football, then yes, I will. Because I believe that the regeneration of the London Road Industrial Estate is what will keep us thriving into the future, an economic future that needs to be able to support all residents living in West Berkshire. So I will be recommending to my group that we continue with our processes that we are going through, that we continue to focus on the regeneration of that site, and that we do exactly what we said to do, which is to look for a suitable alternative. And at this moment in time, we are consulting on that suitable alternative. And for that very reason alone, we will not be supporting this amendment.
Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be interested when London Road finally does get developed, as it looks like this motion will fail today as well, that it's going to fix all the ills of West Berkshire. I mean, it's a few acres in Newbury, and yet it's going to deliver benefit to Councillor Stewart and Councillor Law and Councillor Marino out of the east of the district and Councillor Wollaston at Lambourne. Lynn, let's get real. We support jobs and we support business and the economy, but we also support sports, leisure and culture being in sustainable central locations. Now, Councillor Vickers said that we support the Greens, and we do support the premise of their argument, but you will note that our proposed amendment was to open it until reprovision comes on stream. Part of that was trying to take into account what is happening up at the rugby club, but also it's exactly what Councillor Vickers was saying, is that having looked at where we could reprovide the football club on London Road, we don't think that we could reprovide it anywhere else than somewhere on that site. Which is why we wanted to put a more modest investment in this time round until those plans could be worked up. Having looked at the whole of the London Road site, we are aware of the value of the piece of land that the current football club sits on, and that you would have to release some of that land in order to be able to make the economics of it step up. But we absolutely would, as I said, look to put it on the site, but not build it over it. So we support the Greens in their efforts to make sure that they have a central football location, just slightly differing, probably on some of the timing, Councillor Marsh, and some of those initial costs to re-put into that existing site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Now, I see no further hands, so I'm going to go to the closing order of speaking on this amendment. So I turn to the seconder, Councillor Culver.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The first point that I'd like to make is my understanding that the consultation on Monks Lane has now closed. I'd be grateful if Mrs. Clark perhaps could confirm whether or not that's the case for us whilst I make my closing comments on this amendment. It seems to me that Councillor Doherty has already made a decision about this. She's talked about jobs and the economy on that site and so on. So it would seem that even though there is a consultation to be had, a decision has already been made against having that for football and using it for something else instead. We haven't had a single debate as a council about this. It's another example of the democratic deficit. There's a lot of talk about unity. If there's to be more unity, I think there needs to be more respect for the opposition groups and more openness to having differences of opinion on this and having amendments accepted. Hundreds of thousands of pounds have been spent on this already with nothing to show for it. Time and time again, decisions are made by the members of the executive with little or no say for elected councillors, let alone members of the public. Recently, the leader complained at the executive when There were more public questions about Faraday Road and seemed to be exasperated by the fact that those members of the public kept coming back. But we think it's really important that those members of the public are able to ask questions and seek clarity about this issue. If the council gets this wrong, it's going to be a burden for taxpayers for many years to come. It's crazy to rent somewhere when we already have somewhere else that we can use. There's absolutely no guarantee that we will be able to build on that site. One planning application has already been rejected because of the issue of flooding. So there's no guarantee we'd be able to build anything there for the economy, as Councillor Doherty has said. I would, in my final point, I'd like to make, Chairman, because this is such an important issue, I would like to call for a named vote on this, please, rather than just a leader's indication of how we'd like to vote, if that's acceptable to you, Chairman. And if Mrs. Clark's able to confirm about the Monks Lane consultation as well, I'd be very grateful.
Okay, well, does that proposal of a named vote find a seconder? I'm looking Councillor Marshall. Mrs. Clark, how many do I need to support this?
We need three other members.
Right, are there three other members? Councillor Dillon, I see. Councillor Brooks. Yeah. I think we have the three, right.
Councillor Vickers.
And can you assist us with the timing of the consultation? Or
yes. So for clarification,
point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Councillor Bridgman.
Chairman, as someone who, with my colleagues on the Constitution Task Group, sought to find a way through the morass which is voting on the budget, it was felt that a way forward was to have group voting, ensuring, of course, that any member could indicate that they disagreed with the way that their leader was saying that they voted, in order to speed things up. We are sitting here at the moment, we're going through amendments to the budget. We are not going through the substantive motion. On the substantive motion, there will be a named vote, as there has already been a named vote this evening, or two named votes this evening. We were trying to get a process which sped up and ensured that everyone had their say, everyone ensured that they could indicate they didn't agree, and everyone's name, as if necessary, could be recorded, because Mrs. Clark will know who has voted which way as a result of this process. I simply say I'm disappointed to hear that an attempt to speed up this evening is being opposed. Thank you, Chairman.
Your point is well made and well taken. Mrs. Clark, I defer to your, as the monitoring officer, I defer to your judgment on this. As Councillor Bridgman said, you are fully aware of every name that which has voted on this. Do you have another observation to make?
So I think in terms of the vote, Councillor Culver can request under the Constitution a named vote.
And she has.
And that has been carried. What I would say is, because it's the capital strategy, actually we would have been recording the names of all members voting for, against or abstaining on this particular proposed amendment in any event in the minutes. So it is a slightly longer route, but the outcome will be the same. We will have all members, the method or the manner in which they have voted will be recorded in the minutes. Right. So I think in terms of the other questions raised by Councillor Culver, do you want me to address those now in terms of the consultation?
If you would.
So the proposed amendment, I think for clarification, that the proposed amendment relates to London Road. The consultation relates to proposals at Monks Lane and the Newbury Rugby Club. So I think that there is a difference there in terms of what's being proposed and what is being considered here. The consultation did close on the 28th of February, so it's only closed just very recently. The council is in the process of considering those responses, and there is also further engagement planned. So I think there is a webinar on the 15th of March. So I think there is ongoing dialogue with the community regarding the proposals for the sports ground at Newbury Rugby Club.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, as this is, I'm making a decision, as this is the first time we've done a block vote, as Councillor Culver is entitled to have a name vote, I will allow a name vote on this occasion, but in future, I firmly believe, as Councillor Bridgman has just said, that in order to expedite this, names would still be recorded in a block vote. So, Councillor
Chairman, another point of order. Can I just clarify that this has found an extra 3 members' support?
It did.
Apologies, I missed that.
Oh no, it had more than that. Councillor Dillon, Councillor Masters seconded, Councillor Brooks, and one other at least. It's a point of order. I'm very keen to move this on.
Yeah, it was, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I wanted to do block voting, but if someone asks for votes to be recorded, I'm always happy for my own vote to be recorded. I put my hand up. I don't care.
Right.
But I'm just wondering, Councillor Culver, would you be happy, given what the monitoring officer has just said, that all the names will appear, to not do a recorded vote, just because they will be written down as an amendment? It was just a question, Chairman.
All right, I will enable Councillor Culver to answer that, but by which time, just debating this point, we could have had the name vote, couldn't we? Councillor Culver, what would you wish?
Exactly, I agree with you, Chairman. By the time we've debated this point, we could have just had the vote. I think we should respect members of this council's ability to call for a named vote and to have a vote on whether or not people support that. In this instance, I am happy, as long as what Mrs. Clark has said is correct, that as long as it's in the minutes how people voted, then I'm happy with that, Chairman.
Okay, that's very kind. Thank you very much. I'm going to move this on. You've spoken. Councillor Marsh, you have the opportunity then, Councillor McKinnon. So, Councillor McKinnon, are you happy with that? I hope it wasn't another point of order. Right.
No, carry on, Chairman.
Councillor Marsh.
Well, is that right? I proposed the amendment, Chairman.
Yes, you did. And you, the seconder speaks, then you have the right to reply, and then the executive member, Councillor. Okay. So please don't reiterate what you said in your first 5 minutes.
I think we've covered it very thoroughly.
Thank you.
Chairman, I'm more than happy to move to the vote once Councillor McKinnon has had his response. Thank you.
I like someone who can take a hint. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you very much, Chairman. We've heard a few comments. I'll keep this very brief for you as well, Chairman. We've heard a few comments tonight. The idea that we've not had an opportunity to debate the football pitch going to Monks Lane or to debate what's happening in Faraday Road, I find that utterly laughable. Since I took over the portfolio in October last year, 2019, we've had nothing else at executive and council meetings, meeting after meeting, night after night, talking about a football pitch on Faraday Road. Yeah, a very wry smile on my face at that one. And I think a wry smile as well at Councillor Dillon, bringing in our members from the East, the idea that the regeneration is not going to benefit them. I would take issue with that. And it's a wee bit inconsistent as well. You're saying that the regeneration of the estate wouldn't benefit the members in the East, but earlier on you had all the residents of the East putting their hands in their pocket for their £2 to put the extra 100 grand towards the Faraday Road. So a wee bit of inconsistency there. I'll close with one comment, which is that the proposals from both the Green Party and the Liberal Democrats tonight, they seem very Newbury and Thatcham centric. Because while we're on this idea of the residents in the East not really getting a fair shake, that would never happen with the Conservatives. We are going to be governing for the entirety of the district rather than focusing our efforts on the large conurbations. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. I'm going to hand over to Mrs. Clark to go to the group leaders. I believe that is what we are now happy to do. So,
yes, and I think, apologies, Chairman, just as a matter of convention, normally if a motion or a proposal has been proposed and seconded, we would also check that the seconder is happy with the withdrawal of that. So I think it was Councillor Marsh seconded the proposal for a name vote. And can I just indicate that Councillor Marsh is also happy to have the votes recorded, but by block vote?
I'm happy.
Thank
you. So can I therefore ask Councillor Lynn Doherty on behalf of the Conservative group how they vote with regard to the proposed amendment?
Against.
And Councillor Lee Dillon?
Abstain.
And Councillor Caroline Culver?
For.
And can I now ask any member who wishes to make themselves known if they wish to vote against or in a different way to the manner indicated by their leader? Thank you. I can see nobody indicating a desire to vote differently, and therefore that proposed amendment has been refused.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark. We now move to the main debate. Please indicate if you wish to speak. Councillor Abbs.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'll try and pick up from where my accidental start earlier. I think I'd established that this is an area of expertise for me, and that I had a real concern when somebody starts putting that kind of amount of budget. Well, and I had checked this with the officers beforehand to try and see what the thinking was, because I'm not seeing a lot of justification for a lot of the IT spend within the capital budget. So I'm really quite shocked. And the one that really caught my attention, I think, was the 2 million set aside for ERP system coming along. And I will definitely not argue against systems being able to deliver more efficiency. But when you go along and start saying 2 million for a system, you're pretty much buying the gold standard. We're West Berkshire. As much as I love West Berkshire, we're really not that big. And 2 million on one system, and then all the maintenance going forward, and so on and so on, without a good and proper assessment of what we really want to do, by a good brief that we can send out to say, this is the type of ERP system we need. Setting a number this high does one thing to anybody in the commercial world. They go along, go, all right, they've got 2 million in the budget. Guess what my bid's going to be? In and around the 2 million. And everybody in business knows this. And it's very often why budgets, now we have to do these things differently as a council, but it's often why budgets are basically not revealed to the people responding to briefs, because they tend to come in on budget. So that alone is a bad one. And then we add to that when we talk about, and I'm really kind of getting a little bit tired of hearing about fiscal responsibility. If I ran my companies this way, they would have gone bankrupt years ago. Unfortunately, I don't go into the type of debt that this administration seems to be wanting to drive us, without at least justifying it with the proper briefs and the proper surveys, and certainly not without some kind of clear revenue stream or clear saving that's going to save me in the future years. I just don't see it. Now, maybe the evidence is buried somewhere in there, but it's not in the budget papers as they are brought forward, as far as I can see. And that's just one element of this budget. And there are other elements you could argue, but it's not that I dislike the whole budget. That's certainly not true either. But we're in this ridiculous situation of having to vote on block, and it doesn't matter what amendments come forward from any of the opposition parties. We're not teetering them one at one, are we? We're having to deal with them on block. So if I'd say, well, I don't like that one thing, I have to reject it all. It's so, well, I was going to use the word childish, but I won't actually use that word. It's so ridiculous that it's not worthy of us to actually vote on budget issues this way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have 8 other members so far wishing to speak. Councillor Linden.
Thank you, Chairman. With my fellow ward councillor Joe Stewart, we are proud to highlight 2 capital programmes for Tilehurst Birch Copse. Calcott Schools remodelling, £6.7 million across 2021 to 2024 for the remodelling of accommodation to align with the change of the published admission numbers and to address financial pressures associated with the current PAN and deficiencies with current accommodation. With, as far as the parish council is concerned, from £500,000 allocated directly to community groups from our pilot scheme to top slice and accelerate community infrastructure levy payments to fund infrastructure improvements. Tilehurst Parish Council has been awarded £50,000 to refurbish the Calcott Community Centre to create a multi-purpose community hub. The Calcott Community Centre has been a place for local residents to meet and socialise for many years and was run by local volunteers. Unfortunately, as with many groups and clubs during the pandemic, the club had to close last year. But with some creative thinking, the parish council decided that with some funding, they can help give this building a new lease of life and turn this into a new hub for community to use. for things like mother and baby groups, for learning and development courses and fitness classes. This will also be a welcome boost to the resident in neighbouring parishes too. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Linda. Councillor Tony Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to run through a few items which we actually, on the whole, support, but I have a few questions on pages 89 to 92. And firstly, the Park House expansion, which is in my ward, but using racecourse money. I just want to draw the attention to the fact it's using racecourse money, and it's it's actually further from the racecourse residents for the pupils to get to Park House than it is to any of the 3 other secondary schools in the Newbury Thatcham area. So I do think it's about time that somebody, and maybe Councillor Burke is the right man to answer this, had a look at catchment areas. Is it really necessary to make pupils ride all the way up the hill to Wash Common when they could much more easily and quickly get to St Bart's or Trinity or even Kennet School? Secondly, the Faraday Road footwall. I won't say any more on that. I think we've had enough on that already. But the words replacement for stick in my craw naturally. On page 91, we talk about Aldermaston footways. I just don't understand why it is under the grant for funding when the description of this item talks about it being section 106. Perhaps that could be explained. And is this a roadside footway, or is it one of these wrongly described off-road footpaths? Because a lot on our online map that are actually footpaths away from roads are being described as footways, which is not correct. Now, general footway improvements we welcome very much, and this is all obviously going to help with active travel. But I do wonder whether the funding amounts being put in the 3 years we're looking at are going to be enough. I think we need to look over the coming year to see whether the levels of walking do stay at the high level that we've been seeing, and I'm pleased that we are seeing that. I'm very pleased to see more funding for recreational walk routes and for signing improvements, including rural rights of way signing, please. And of course, you would expect me to say I'm pleased about funding for cycling routes as well. And I hope that once we adopt the LC, the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan later this month, that we can get on with that, get off to a flying start with using that money. Kings Road traffic management, welcome. That's a Newbury-centric bit of funding. Thank you, Councillor McKinnon, for that. It's so long that we've been waiting for the Stirling Cables development. I'm pleased to see it's going on. It looks pretty ugly at the moment, but I'm hoping it will look a bit better when there's some fire-resistant, hopefully cladding put on it. And I look forward, I hope that the Town Council and the residents in the area and the businesses down the Hambridge Road estate are going to be involved in the new traffic management arrangements there. Because this is a B road, remember, going through there. It is quite a vital bit of the highway network. And finally, that road to nowhere, the Sandalford access from the A339. A lot of money to be spending on something where the destination for people using it still hasn't got planning consent 10 years after it was allocated for housing. I'll say no more apart from thank you for a little bit of money for the Newbury rail station. And I'm very pleased that Newbury Town Council's bid for that little bit of money, which in the end didn't come from Network Rail, or was it Great Western Railway, to help with signing to Newbury Station. At least we're going to get some money from SIL. So that's all I have to say, Chairman. A very good set of projects going into the scheme, but I have a few questions about some of them. Thank you.
I'm sure they'll be answered. We have about half an hour's worth of speakers if you will take your time. Councillor Culver.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'll be as brief as possible. We'll be abstaining on this because we can't support it, bearing in mind that the amendments weren't passed, but I just want to point out a few things that we do support. We support the new food waste initiative, but we also think there needs to be a campaign of education to encourage people not to waste so much food in the future. So we think that's the sort of thing we should be focused on we're grateful to the officers for the amount of work that they've done on this. It's a much better scheme than the previous scheme where we had the small caddy with holes in and people had to put a bag in it to stop the food leaking out. So hopefully this project will work much better than the previous one. But then you have to ask the question as well, is it a good use of £900,000? It is a lot of money, so hopefully it will work. And just to reiterate that we are still against the green garden bin charge. We see it as a tax on recycling. Active travel, we support this. It's something that we've talked about for a long time. We need more cycling, more walking, etc. The point that Councillor Doherty made about the Conservatives are not just focused on Newbury, they're focused on the whole area. As far as I'm aware, most of the active travel money is actually being spent on the Newbury Thatcham conurbation. We think that more of it should be spent in the rural areas. The Hampstead Norreys cycle path down to Hermitage, for example, is an excellent initiative. And we think we should be joining up things like that with the Newbury Town Centre so that people can come in from the rural area. And the final point, Chairman, we support the solar farm project. We think it's a great idea, but we do need to do much more than this if the council is to become carbon neutral by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Colvert. Councillor Marino.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Very happy to support the capital strategy. Just wanted to speak briefly from a ward perspective. In case anyone has missed it, obviously I'm one of the members for a ward in the east of the district. If I happen to live a couple of roads down from the boundary of Reading Borough. And one of the things I've heard a lot over the last few years, particularly since I've been an elected member, is how Newbury Council, as a lot of people who live in my area refer to it, seem to care much about the East, which is why I was particularly delighted to see over £500,000 worth of investment in my ward, particularly for the renovation of Brookfield's SEN school, as I'm sure that was shared by my fellow councillors, Councillor Williamson and Councillor Jones. And I hope that that demonstrates to the people in my area that that this Conservative administration does care about the district as a whole. That's what I want to say. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Law.
Thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to speak, Chairman. I would like to talk to the capital budget because this is often, I believe, the overlooked good news part of this, the council budget night. It's all about investing into our futures. And as you see, we're planning to invest about 123 million over the next 3 years. The Conservatives have been in power in West Berkshire for the last 15 or so years. And I've been privileged to be part of that for 14 years. And it's interesting, Councillor Brooks was asking about the MTFS, you know, can we check up and see how we're going and how we've done? It's interesting to see how we've done with our investments in capital over the last 15 years or so. I've calculated that we probably invest an average of about 40 million every year into things like schools, children's services, and of course infrastructure, of which the jewel in the crown's got to be our fibre super fast broadband. We've got better broadband, enables us to have this Zoom tonight, much better than many metropolitan areas. So what's been the result of that? Well, the Sunday Times, those of you who read it last Sunday will see where West Berkshire, #2 for happiness in the whole of the country, #4 for overall health and well-being. That's a result of our Conservative 40 million every year invested into West Berkshire. And I think it's something we ought all to be proud of. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Councillor Wollaston.
Apologies, Chairman, I was muted. I'm delighted to speak in favour of this motion. My portfolio is split into public health and community well-being, which is has ring-fenced funding, and leisure and culture. This capital strategy and programme is meeting the cost of the playing pitch strategy approved in February 2020 by providing £1.8 million over 2 financial years to fund 6 new 3G artificial pitches across West Berkshire for football, rugby and other field sports. Further, we are meeting our obligations under the London Road Industrial Estate economic regeneration plans proposed by this administration, provide a budget of £1.65 million to create a new Step 6 artificial pitch at Monks Lane site. This will allow Newbury Football Club to have a new home with proper facilities, and the scheme is designed to be upgraded as far as a Step 2 facility if we are fortunate enough to see either our ladies or men's teams be successful in their leagues. This is a significant improvement on the old Faraday Road facility and Sport England, the RFU and the FA are in full support. We're also looking at opportunities to upgrade or create more grass pitches for community football, with Goldwell Park currently being investigated as a possible first. Also allocated is £150,000 for consultancy to progress a proposed significant refurbishment of Northbrook Leisure Centre in Newbury in 2023, and £160,000 for a refresh and provision of a modular exercise studio extension to Hungerford Leisure Centre. We've agreed in principle and subject to approval of the business cases, a refresh of Kennet Leisure Centre and a refurbishment of the much-loved Newbury Lido to allow outdoor swimming 6 months of the year and a more family-friendly environment. But we are not ignoring the east of the district either, and we're at the very early stages of looking at an improved leisure provision there. All this will be contained within the updated leisure strategy due to come to executive for approval in October. On the cultural side, there's provision for upgrades to Shore House and allocations for the museum and libraries. All in all, a major commitment to leisure and cultural facilities in West Berkshire, and I commend the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Williston. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chairman. I hadn't actually intended to talk to the capital strategy, but there are so many good things within it that will be of interest to my residents in Newbury Speed, and I feel I simply have to highlight some of them. Of course, the investment into education across my ward is something I know is important to the families that I represent. Investment into 3 primary schools is most welcome, and in particular, the commitment for a new school for Shore-cum-Donington as the parish expands to accommodate the new housing development. This provision is going to be needed. As anyone who has visited the lovely but small existing primary school will know, a new building with new green space will benefit an increased cohort of pupils. I'm also pleased to see the maintenance of Shore House within the capital strategy. This lovely historic building is a go-to destination for many with its growing events calendar. And as life gradually returns to normal, I look forward to once more being able to attend this beautiful venue in the very heart of my ward. And finally, having heard from many residents of their concerns regarding traffic on Love Lane, I welcome the 1.5 million being used to improve capacity at the Robin Hood roundabout. A welcome alleviation to both existing concerns, but also future ones as the new development of North Newbury takes shape. So thank you for the capital strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Councillor Hilary Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to draw members' attention to page 122 of the agenda, Appendix F, which is a report of the successful SIL bid rounds. And there's a list of the successful bids which have really benefited many local community groups, including in my own ward, Hermitage, have successfully bid to enable the Hermitage Village Hall to complete the build of the smaller hall. And I think it's this pilot project for use of SIL monies to allow local communities to build for it has been absolutely excellent. And I do hope that we will carry on with that because it's been really appreciated by those communities who've bid for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, we put an amendment down to this capital strategy, and that has failed. So we won't be voting in favour of this, but we will abstain. We recognise, as Councillor Law said, £120 million of investment. Councillor Law, I don't think it's all down to Conservatives. If you're doing 40 million a year, that's roughly 50% council funding, 50% government grants, which would have been different colour governments over that 15 years, as well as SIL and Section 106. But well done, you wrote the cheques, I suppose, once it came in. So look, we're really happy to see these investments across the district. Councillor Vickers outlined quite a few of them. I'm expecting my new electric bike to arrive on Thursday, so I'm hoping that I'll be able to avail myself of some of these rides, particularly the one up to Hampstead Norris that I can see that is in there, back to where my family are from. And so what I want just the leader and any members of the public to see is that by us abstaining tonight on this, we are not saying that we don't want to see the vast majority of these projects go ahead, but we want to take a pragmatic approach, and we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Councillor Jeffrey. You're muted.
I'm not now muted. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're not.
I think that Councillor Culver really has made the point a few minutes ago. £900,000 is well nigh 1% of council tax. And to spend that sort of sum of money on a new food waste caddy, do you know, I think that just as Hall Belisha became known in history as the Minister of Transport because of the Belisha beacon named after him on zebra crossings, I rather suspect that maybe Councillor McKinnon will be known in West Berkshire for the McKinnon caddies. If you had 1% of West Berkshire Council's council tax to spend, where would you spend it? Well, if you're an accountant like Councillor McKinnon, you'd spend it adding a McKinnon caddy to your collection or your already collection of waste and recycling bins. The green bins already exist. They're already used for food waste anyway. And that's even if, like me, you don't pay the extra charge for having garden waste collected. And all that we need to do is to start collecting them weekly. If they have a badge on, then they'll collect the garden compost as well. If they don't have a badge on like mine, then they'll collect the food waste. So all that is needed is to leave the green bins as they are and save potentially hundreds of thousands of pounds of council taxpayers' money. Perhaps Councillor McKinnon in the finance portfolio couldn't see a place for that money to be spent. But I suspect that 150,000 residents of West Berkshire will quite easily see better ways to splash. Better roads, planning service, more computers and support for schools. I think these are things which would apply from Hungerford in the west to Tilehurst in the east, and from Thatcham and Newbury way up to East and West Ilsley. I think that most people in West Berkshire would think there are better ways of spending nearly 1% of council taxpayers' money than in shiny brand new McKinnon caddies. So move to weekly collections for food waste, absolutely, but use the green bins that we already have. Thank you.
Thank you. I have two more to speak before the final closing speakers. Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought you'd be going to Councillor Arda Walter, so I was still muted.
Well, yeah, you switched places.
I will certainly let Councillor Arda Walter answer Councillor Jeffrey's comments on the caddies. Councillor Law, actually, his comments on superfast broadband remind me that I really must follow up that call to GigaClear. Chairman, there are two very welcome capital projects in my ward, Burfield and Mortimer, and then a third in the ward, which I'll come to in a moment. The two that came through the SIL route, well, they both started out as SIL applications for the 500,000 community fund. The first one, which is part of that fund now, is to assist Burfield Parish Council in making improvements to the parish village hall. The second one started out life as a SIL bid, but actually turned into an environment project, and that is the project to assist Stratford Mortimer Parish Council to substantially improve the pavement, which is a footway between the village and the junior school. But the project I welcome both of those, but the project I really want to mention is the photovoltaic project in what is termed in a lot of paperwork Graiseley, but is actually in Wakefield. It's in the Wakefield parish, and I welcome that, although I am going to be careful as to my words, because of course it will be going through planning, it will be going through all sorts of processes, and I want to ensure that I'm not predisposing myself to anything on that project. But I just want to mention that project for one reason. I hope you'll indulge me, Chairman, which is to say the only reason we can do that is because, amongst other things, our legal department, and congratulations to Sarah Clark and her team, and indeed congratulations to the emergency planning group, managed to defeat and we haven't mentioned it in council before, I think, managed to defeat the judicial review application by the developers on the Graiseley site. And that was a stunningly good piece of legal work. And I really want to take this opportunity to congratulate you, Chairman. So I thank you for indulging that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Waters, the last one.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to respond to some of the points raised on environmental matters. Firstly, I was rather surprised with Councillor Jeffries homing in on caddies. He is rather wrong in that the great majority of the cost of the 900,000 is not caddies, which is very minor, it's trucks. It's for a specific new additional collection, and that will mean that more food waste is separately collected and disposed of locally. It will in fact save the council money, and it will save residents money, because instead of us having to pay for trucking that food along with black bin waste out of the district, it will be composted here in Padworth. So it is a financially very sound measure. It is environmentally excellent measure, and I do look forward to sharing further news of it with members later on. On a couple of other matters, I thank Councillor Culver for her comments about active travel. And yes, absolutely, I do want us to expand cycling measures in particular outside Newbury and Thatcham, and indeed connecting the Hampstead Norreys to Hermitage track with Newbury is a really big, exciting project. It is, however, though, a very expensive long-term thing. We will get there, but it will take many years. Finally, there are several other elements related to driving our strategy forward in the capital budget. Members will have seen our continued investment in electric vehicle charging and indeed in natural carbon sequestration, which we're proposing to spend over £1 million in this coming year alone. So we have a good range of environmental projects here, and I welcome this budget. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey, you have already spoken. You can only speak once. I take it that's an old hand, unless it's a point of order.
No, Chairman, it is not. It's a point of order. I think it's completely inappropriate that to be told now that a sum as large as £900,000, well nigh £1 million, is broken down into various other things, none of which is displayed there. It's shown as £900,000 for a caddy system, which would work out at the thick end of £20.
Okay, you've made your point, and you've had an answer. Thank you for that.
I don't think I have had an answer. That information should have been there in the budget papers.
Right. I'll see if Councillor McKinnon has an answer.
Chairman, point of order, please.
Go on, Councillor Law.
Yeah, I don't think Councillor Jeffries was a point of order. I think it should be overruled.
Yeah. Mrs. Clark, any comment?
Sorry, Chairman, did you hear what I
did hear what you said.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Look, I'm moving this on now. Mrs. Clark, unless you wish to make a quick comment.
No, simply that it is a matter for the chairman to determine.
It is, isn't it? I'm going to go on to the second, and now Councillor Bowick. You haven't spoken. Councillor Bowick, I can't hear you. You're muted. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Members, I'm pleased to support this strategy and the programme it enables, not least because it demonstrates this Conservative administration's commitment to our overall council strategy, which includes its priorities, support everyone to reach their full potential, an aim which I'm sure we all embrace. Over the next 3 years, we plan to spend a further £35.7 million on our schools. And we've heard from many members this evening about schools in their own particular areas, which shows that this is a plan which reaches across the district. Those schools include early years settings, primaries and secondaries, and our all-important alternative education provisions, which includes the flagship Brookfield School, which was mentioned earlier. This money will be spent on providing the basic need places for children as our population grows, on enhancing and improving facilities, and ensuring our existing provision continues in the quality we expect for our children and young people. After the completion this year of 2 brand new primary schools at Thiel and Sandalford, and the fantastic extension to Trinity School in Newbury, we'll see the modelling of accommodation at Calcutta schools, the rationalisation of accommodation at Parsons Down schools in Thatcham, and the long-awaited replacement of modular buildings at Falkland Primary in Newbury. These, along with the project to increase capacity at the highly valued Castlegate Respite Care Facility, form an overall programme of 27 significant projects. And I'm proud to say that this Conservative administration is once again bringing forward investment in our educational infrastructure that will benefit the children and young people and their families of every part of West Berkshire. Chairman, members, I commend this paper to you and urge you to support it with your votes.
Thank you, Councillor Berwick. Councillor McKinnon, you have the last word. Then we go to the vote.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thanks to all members, both Conservative and Opposition, for your contributions tonight. But particularly want to just touch on a few contributions. Councillor Vickers and Councillor Dillon, I was encouraged to hear your messages of support. You know, I could from your speeches there, I could tell that you supported a lot of what was in here. You know, you've made the decision to abstain rather than support it, and of course that's up to you. Personally speaking, I don't think there would be a logical fallacy in you voting for it. I think, yep, your amendments failed, and I understand you're disappointed with that, but that's gone. That's kind of a sunk cost. But that's over to you, and I'll take the comments if not the votes. I think I do have to come up with a couple of corrections of detail for a couple of the members. Can we go back all the way back to Councillor Abbs, who spoke first, I think, this evening, talking about the ERP system, the Enterprise Resource Planning System. The amount of money in the capital programme, you know, we may not spend that amount. We need to have something in the capital programme for our members to approve. But when it comes down to it, you know, we'll go through the procurement process, and if the business case for the system stacks up, there's no question of us not trying to obtain value for money for that. It's good that he's an expert, as he told us, so he should know that ERP systems do drive savings via cost reductions. He made a comment that struck me as, well, I couldn't believe it. The phrase was, he's tired of hearing of fiscal responsibility. That was the exact phrase that was used, and he said it, I think, 3 times, one after the other, to emphasise the point. So I can't even put it down to misspeaking. He went on to make the point that he doesn't think we should have investment in the capital programme without a clear revenue stream coming out of it. Now I'm flabbergasted by that. Let me tell him that the purpose of the capital programme, and the words are recorded so we can go back and check it, the purpose of the programme is to invest for the residents of West Berkshire. Let me tell you, a new school doesn't have a revenue stream. New trees, afforestation schemes, they don't have a revenue stream. Highways improvements don't result in a revenue stream. Active travel, you get the point I'm trying to make here. Some of the projects in the programme, of course, are invest to save, and they will have a revenue stream. But I think there was a fundamental...
Chair, I'm allowed a personal explanation, I believe.
No, not at this stage. Perhaps I'll allow it at the end.
Thank you.
It really demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of what the capital programme is intended to achieve. So I wanted to clarify that for any residents looking in, the point of the capital programme is not to make money. And to Councillor Jeffrey, firstly, your idea about the McKinnon caddies, I guess we can take the recognition wherever it comes. If that's the way it's going to go, that's the way it's going to go. But it is trucks, not caddies, and I would take slight issue with your point, which was rather forcefully made, but on page 91 of the pack, it's in the big spreadsheet, but it's partway down. I'm reading from the description: separate food waste, the provision of fleet and infrastructure to provide a separate food waste service for the council. Fleet is trucks, you know, it is right there in black and white. So I'm not sure about the import of that complaint. I'm very surprised. I can't remember what meeting it was. It was about a year ago, but we sat in council or executive. I think it was a full council meeting, not the budget meeting. And we had full-throated support from the Liberal Democrats for a separate food waste collection to improve the food waste recycling and recycling rates across the borough. So I'm surprised to hear him depart from that. We shall have to plough on regardless without his support. But overall, I think that was a good debate and people had their say, and I'm heartened by some of the messages of support. So I'll leave it there, Chairman, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. The only time I can allow a member to speak twice is a point of order, and it has to be very much a point of order, not a point of explanation. So unless it's a point of order, Councillor Abbs, I can't allow you to speak.
Sorry, Chairman, a member is allowed, subject to your discretion, to raise a point of personal explanation.
All right, okay, thank you for that. The point of a personal explanation, if you're brief, Councillor Abs.
Yeah, of course, Chairman. As Councillor McKinnon fully knows, I was referring to IT at the time, not all the other subjects he raised. Okay. So why is he drowning on about everything else? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that.
I'll have a point of order there.
I'll hand over to Mrs. Clark for the vote, which will
have a point of order, please.
And votes to be recorded. Sorry, who's?
Sorry, Chairman, it's Councillor McKinnon. I think I was very respectful in my tone. I may have made a robust argument, but I didn't use the word droning, which I think is slightly inappropriate. And I would say even IT systems don't necessarily have to generate a revenue saving. But I'll leave it there in your hands, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I didn't hear the word droning, and I'm drawing a line under this now. Mrs. Clark, will you please take us through to the vote?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So I'm now going to do a name vote. So I will invite all members to unmute their microphones. I am going to go down the list of members and ask them whether they vote for, against or abstain in relation to this proposal. So Councillor Adrian Abbs.
Abstain.
Councillor Steve Ardar-Walter.
For.
Councillor Peter Argyle.
For.
Councillor Phil Barnett.
Abstain.
Councillor Jeff Beck.
For.
Councillor Dennis Bennyworth.
For.
Councillor Dominic Bowick.
For.
Councillor Graham Bridgman.
For.
Councillor Jeff Brooks.
Abstain.
Councillor Jeff Cant.
For.
Councillor Hilary Cole.
For.
For.
Councillor James Cole.
For.
Councillor Jeremy Cottam.
Abstain.
Councillor Caroline Culver.
Abstain.
Councillor Lee Dillon.
Abstain.
Councillor Linda Hotty.
For.
Councillor Billy Drummond.
Abstain.
Councillor Clive Hooker.
For.
Councillor Nasser Hunt.
Abstain.
Councillor Gareth Hurley.
For.
Councillor Owen Jeffrey.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Rick Jones.
For.
Councillor Alan Law.
For.
Councillor Tony Linden.
For.
Councillor Royce Longton.
Abstain.
Councillor Ross McKinnon.
For.
Councillor Alan Macrow.
Abstain.
Councillor Tom Marino.
For.
Councillor David Marsh.
Abstain.
Councillor Steve Masters.
Abstain.
Councillor Jeff Mays.
Abstain.
Councillor Andy Moore.
Abstain.
Councillor Graham Pask.
For.
Councillor Eric Pattenden.
Abstain.
Councillor Claire Rolls.
For.
Councillor Garth Simpson.
For.
Councillor Richard Sumner.
For.
Councillor Joanne Stewart.
For.
Councillor Martha Vickers.
Abstain.
Councillor Tony Vickers.
Abstain.
Councillor Andy Williamson.
For.
Councillor Keith Woodhams.
Abstain.
Councillor Howard Wollaston.
For.
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that that motion has been approved.
Right, thank you. Now, I did promise right at the outset we could have a comfort break. I am conscious that it's nearly 9:10. We still have the big item to go with other business to conduct as well. So I'm going to propose no more than 10 minutes. Could we be back by 1:15 to be actually, sorry, it's 21:08 now, isn't it? Is 1:15 7 minutes adequate?
Yes, I think so, Chairman.
Right, let's make it 7 minutes. At 1:15, we'll be back. We've still got a lot of business which we've got to get through this evening. So,
thank you, Chair.
In 1:15. Members, thank you. I see most of you are coming back very quickly. I'm grateful. Mrs. Clark, are you with us?
I am, Chairman.
Right, I just see there are a few people potentially with just their names, not their pictures. I'll give it literally a few more seconds. I'm acutely aware that we have 1 hour and a quarter to conduct our business. 10:30 is an absolute guillotine. I will be looking, I'm pretty certain, at around 9:45, half an hour, for a proposal to extend the meeting to the maximum of 10:30. Right, I've still got, I think, 5 people missing. Do you concur, Mrs. Clark?
Sorry, I believe we have 2 members who have dropped off, and I'm just seeking clarification as to who they are.
I can't see councillors Cottam, Simpson, Argyle, Longton or Beck.
Okay, we'll contact Jeremy and Royce, Chairman.
If you would.
Councillor Cottam, is that?
I'm here, Chairman.
Oh, good, well done, excellent. Well, can I, Mrs. Clark, is it in order for me to read the way in which we're going to conduct the revenue budget, at least to start?
Yes, that's fine, and I can confirm that Stephen Chard has just confirmed that all members are in fact back in the room with us, so to speak. I think before we start the revenue budget item, I just need to clarify that Councillor Claire Rolls had declared an other registrable interest in relation to this item by virtue of the fact that she is appointed as a trustee member on the CAB, and there is the proposal relating to the motion submitted by Councillor Vickers relating to the CAB. So Councillor Rolls will be made an attendee for the duration of this item and will not therefore vote or take part in the matter.
Thank you for that clarification, Mrs. Clark. Right, members, before moving on to the revenue budget, I'd like to clarify the rules of debate, which has been agreed with all group leaders. I've been made aware there are a number of amendments. In order to ensure the best use of our time this evening, the amendments will be introduced during the main speeches. So firstly, I shall ask Councillor McKinnon again to move the motion as set out in the agenda, including alterations to recommendation 10 and the taxi and hackney carriage fees, which will be seconded by Councillor Doherty. During his presentation, Councillor McKinnon will speak to the report for up to 10 minutes. I will then ask Councillor Brooks to respond to the motion. He will have up to 10 minutes to speak, including introducing his amendments. That, I believe, will be seconded by Councillor Dillon, who will have up to 5 minutes. I will invite other people to speak to the amendment and then put it to the vote. I will then ask Councillor Marsh to respond to the motion. He will have up to 5 minutes to speak, including introducing his amendment. And that, I believe, will be seconded by Councillor Masters, who will also have up to 5 minutes. I will invite other people to speak to the amendment and put it to the vote. Following that, that vote, the debate will return to the substantive motion, which will also be voted on. All portfolio and shadow portfolio holders will be permitted to speak for up to 5 minutes on the motion and the amendment, with all other members being allowed 2.5 minutes. The monitoring officer will announce, as with the capital programme, how the vote will be taken. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Councillor McKinnon to present the report and formally move. Well, could you just present the report and formally move it? I'll ask Councillor Doherty to second it, and then I'll come back to you to introduce the item.
Yeah, thank you, of course, Chairman. And it's a bit of a mouthful to formally move the recommendation, so I'll get through it as quickly as possible. It's my very great pleasure to present West Berkshire Council's revenue budget for 2021 to 22. And I propose that Council accepts the recommendations presented in section 2 of the report, and with your consent, Chairman, with the following 3 minor amendments, all of which were circulated to members yesterday. Firstly, that paragraph 7 be amended with the revised figures circulated to all members on Friday and again yesterday, following the late submission of precept information from one of the parishes and corresponding changes to Appendix K arising for the same reason. Secondly, that paragraph 10 be amended to read to consider and reject the motion presented at the council meeting of the 3rd of December 2020 regarding the Citizens Advice Bureau. And finally, an alteration to Appendix F Part 2, Fees and Charges, on page 187 of the agenda pack, implementing the recommendation of the Licensing Committee to freeze the fees in respect of taxi and hackney carriage licences. That is it, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is that seconded, Councillor Doherty?
I'm happy to second that, Chairman, but I'll reserve my rights.
Thank you very much, Councillor McKinnon.
Sorry, Councillor Pask, can we, because the minor alterations were moved, that is actually subject to the agreement of council. So if I could ask the three leaders to indicate by way of a block vote whether they are prepared to accept those minor alterations. So I'll start with Councillor Doherty.
Accept.
And Councillor Dillon. I can see a thumbs up.
Accept. Sorry.
Thank you.
Scrolling over.
And Councillor Culver.
Accept.
Thank you. And can I just check whether any member, if they could indicate whether they disagree with that? Thank you, Chairman. Those minor amendments have been accepted. So yes, it moves now to the mover of the motion.
Thank you for keeping on the straight and narrow, Mrs. Clark. Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you very much, Mrs. Clark, for that as well. It's remarkable to think that it's a year since my first budget as portfolio holder. Although last year the leader proposed the revenue budget, this year I'm very pleased to have the honour of doing so. And that council meeting last March was one of the last occasions that we were all in the chamber together. I never thought I'd miss standing up to give a speech with the massed ranks of the opposition in front of me, waiting to tear it apart. But I do miss it. And it's already been spoken about tonight by several members. I hope we can get back to the council chamber as soon as it's safe to do so. Each quarter during the financial year, at executive and OSMC meetings, we review the actual revenue spend against the budget we set the previous March. And it's fair to say that the budget that we set last March, COVID has resulted in a significant divergence from the budget in some services, specifically in the People Directorate. I would thank Councillor Brooks in particular for taking a constructive approach during those meetings and recognising the unprecedented challenges faced by the Council this year. Now, the Council has received substantial support from central government during the pandemic, nearly £10 million in unring-fenced funding, about £2.5 million compensation for lost income, and an allowance to spread any collection fund deficits over 3 years rather than one. In the longer term, there will be ongoing impacts on future budgets. There have, of course, sadly been more deaths than usual among the elderly population, which has suppressed demand for adult social care services. Longer term changes in behaviour might mean that car parking and other income streams never recover to their pre-COVID levels. I'd like to take a moment at this point to pay tribute to our revenues and benefits team, who, assisted by seconded staff from across the council, have done an outstanding job in distributing business grants and rate reliefs to firms across the district. They've worked flat out to provide over £70 million of support to businesses who desperately needed it to sustain them through the pandemic. I'll turn now to the CAB motion. Now, I was a wee bit puzzled earlier on to hear complaints that it wasn't being debated. I appreciate some of those comments might have been about other motions, but this motion is being debated here, and I would thank Councillor Martha Vickers for her patience. The motion has budgetary implications, as it's calling on funds to be invested in the Citizens Advice Bureau, hence the quite proper route of dealing with it here. We can't accept part of a motion, as we know. The Constitution doesn't allow that. Now, to sum up, the CAB motion called on the Council to lobby our 3 MPs to campaign to make various changes to the benefit system and financial support. As members will know, these are matters reserved for national government. In any event, in the case of universal credit, the PM has earlier stated that the matters are currently under review, and Councillor Vickers herself told us that a decision has been made on that this evening. Given that that's the case, we do not propose to lobby our MPs to do that. In terms of providing adequate resources to the CAB, which was the other part of the motion and why it has budgetary implications, I'm pleased to confirm that in 2020-21...
Sorry, point of order, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, it was just, so we got the amendments through yesterday, and the amendment said, instead of consider the motion, it said to reject the motion, but Councillor McKinnon just said the reason for rejecting it was because of the decision making today by the government.
No, I'm happy to clarify that for Councillor Dillon. It's the position of this administration that we reject the motion. Clearly that is up for debate this evening. One of the reasons why we would seek to reject it is because the decision to increase or freeze benefits is an issue for national government. I was given the example that national government have indeed decided that. So it's the reason why, even if they decided the other way, I'd still be saying it's not for us here to debate that. Going back to the second part of the motion about resources, I can confirm that in the current financial year, we've provided the CAB with £104,000, and we have a service level agreement in place with them, which runs until March 2022. So for those reasons, it's certainly the position of the administration that the motion be rejected. Turning back to the revenue budget. The headline announcement of any revenue budget is the decision on how much to raise council tax. Now, as a Conservative, my instinct is to leave as much of our residents' cash in their pockets as possible. Now, I'd dearly like, in principle, to be talking about freezing or cutting council tax rather than putting it up at all. But I also happen to live in the real world. The council's costs rise year on year. It costs more every year to provide the same level of services to our residents. 75% of the council's income, I mentioned this earlier, comes from council tax and the adult social care precept. So West Berkshire is heavily geared towards council tax, unfortunately. Now, this year's local government financial settlement permits councils to raise core council tax by up to 1.99%, which we have done in view of the cost inflation I just mentioned. We're also permitted to take up to 3% on the adult social care precept, spread over the next 2 years. I believe many councils across the country have opted to take the full 3% this year, giving an overall council tax rise of 4.99%. We've chosen not to do this. We've chosen to take no adult social care precept this year. So our council tax rise overall is only 1.99%. And I understand that we're in a small minority of councils across England with such a small rise. It is important to explain the factors behind this decision. Firstly, as I mentioned earlier, sadly, there have been more deaths than were predicted during 2020-21, due, of course, to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I dearly wish this wasn't the case and that we hadn't seen the number of deaths occur earlier than would have happened otherwise. But it is the case. Demand for the service is therefore lower this year and will most likely be lower than originally forecast in future years before resuming its upward trend. It's the principal driver of the 3.2 million projected underspend in the current financial year, which will increase the general reserves by that amount. It would be simply wrong to impose an extra precept for adult social care when we have such a large underspend in the service this year and lower than expected demand in the year to come. We're therefore able to pass on that increase in the general reserve back to our residents and to take a lower council tax burden from them. That being said, we're only in a position to do so because of the extensive financial report from central government during the pandemic, which I've already spoken about this evening. Nearly 10 million in unring-fenced funds in addition to 2.3 million for lost non-commercial income. We would have had a very different financial picture if we'd not had that support. I'm also pleased to confirm that we're once again able to provide a £150 reduction to council tax for working age claimants receiving the council tax reduction. This will provide very welcome support to some of our residents on the lowest incomes. Now, I'm very proud that this revenue budget provides extensive investment towards achieving the priorities in the administration's council strategy. £150,000 worth of investment goes towards our environment strategy. This is the revenue equivalent of the capital strategy that we talked earlier on. This includes moving the council to a green energy supply and increased staffing resources to deliver the environment strategy itself. Coupled with the £12.5 million invested in the capital programme, we're delivering on our clear commitment to work towards net zero by 2030, protect our green spaces and conserve our natural environment. In West Berkshire, the Conservative administration are a safe choice for residents who care about careful environmental stewardship coupled with sensible governance and financial management. £285,000 is invested in our economic development service, including extra staff resource and £100,000 towards project management and consultancy support for the London Road Industrial Estate regeneration. In 2019, our West Berkshire Conservative manifesto was quite clear. We promised that we would ensure the district was attractive to the business community. We want to encourage new commercial opportunities across the district to ensure high employment and a strong local economy. Our investment in infrastructure is intended to help business to thrive and enable their economic and physical expansion. Now, this administration is very clear that support for business and a strong local economy is essential to provide good jobs for our residents and underpin the council tax and business rates base in the district. That funds the provision of our vital local services. You cannot have one without the other. Elsewhere in the revenue budget, £120,000 is invested towards our vulnerable children and adults achieving better outcomes, including £80,000 for new family support workers and £40,000 invested in the implementation of the prevention strategy. The budget makes further investment in apprenticeships, digitisation of services and enhanced engagement and communication resources to facilitate residents' involvement in communication with the council. Finally, The revenue budget for the year to come contains £3.2 million of more unring-fenced COVID funding from the government to continue to support adult social care, lost income and other affected areas. The budget contains savings and income generation proposals totalling £3.7 million. We have a responsibility to our residents to be as efficient as possible and to provide value for their money by transforming the way we work when we can. Just like this year, I'm delighted to confirm that none of these savings will result in cuts to frontline services. Turning now to reserves. The Section 151 officer is required to make a recommendation for the minimum level of the general reserve for non-specific items and risks. He has recommended a minimum general reserve of 7 million. The general reserve's position, even after the use of funds to support the low council tax rise, will increase from 8 million last year to 9.35 million in April 2021. It is prudent, and this has been raised before tonight, it is prudent with all of the continuing uncertainty caused by the COVID pandemic to have a healthy level of reserves, and I'm very happy that we have exactly that. I believe that this budget strikes the right balance between investing in services and infrastructure while keeping council tax rises to a minimum.
30 seconds.
There are, of course, uncertainties and risks in the years ahead, but this budget ensures that we're financially resilient for the future. We have exciting new schemes in the budget and long-term investment in our district. Thanks very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Right, I turn to Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman, and I will speak mainly to the amendment at this stage.
Yeah.
We put forward this package of amendments to the budget proposals as a way of adding some additional spending that improves council services and thereby the quality of those services to our residents. Overall, the actual amount of money to be spent is modest and affordable and comprises 21 additional lines of spend costing from £4,000 on one line up to £150,000 on another. And in total, just under 600k of recurring revenue, a little bit over 600k of one-off investment. And within that, we will particularly support greening the council and the district, and which Councillor Abbs will speak about later. Now, I've said several times in full council and council executive meetings that the budget in 2020 and early 2021, the year we are in, has not been easy to manage. And I'm grateful for Councillor McKinnon's comments on that. Not been easy to manage or forecast. There will need to be prudence in the next year as we come out of the pandemic, hopefully in the second quarter of this calendar year. And that is why we've not brought back some of the amendments we put forward last year, including far better communication with the public. That does not mean we do not want to invest in those areas, but for this year, we've set our sights on help to groups who may well have been going through very difficult times. I will talk about some of our individual amendments in a moment, and I believe that some of them, at least some of them, would find some sort of support, even tacit support, among Conservative backbenchers. But, Mr. Chairman, despite discussions regarding taking our amendments separately or in small blocks, and this was discussed 12 months ago after the budget meeting, I understand this has not found favour with the council leader at this time, and thus even if there was something in our amendments that everybody could agree on, then it will fail because of this all-in or all-out process. And of course, that is what the public finds so ridiculous about local government. Its constant lack of flexibility or common sense. And in my experience, the chairman has been able to elect to take amendments as he sees fit, but evidently not this year. So an item costing £4,000, freezing adult social care personal fee increases is very hard to vote down, but it will be because of the leader's decision. The amendments must be taken en bloc. Council tax relief for care leavers at 20k is similar in its effect, but will fail tonight for that reason. I want to fund to arts and culture and support to the Corn Exchange Learning Centre that we put forward will fail tonight. And help to taxi drivers who have really suffered in the last year will fail tonight because of this determination to take these amendments en bloc. Unless there's an enlightened moment this evening, Chairman, the same old budget process will be followed. The opposition puts forward a number of amendments, some of them spotting areas that could be improved with the administration's budget proposals, but because the leadership of the council does not have infallible capability to come up with every good idea. let me repeat that as I have time so to do. You are not infallible as an executive, as an administration. You will get things wrong. You will omit things that might be a good idea. But your process on budget night is to refuse everything, rather than perhaps once or twice turning around and saying, that's something we hadn't thought of and will support. So I suspect we'll get some acerbic and dismissive comments from the Conservative members about our amendments, and then they'll be voted down en bloc in the same old way. And such a dogmatic approach simply hurts the people of West Berkshire, because nobody but the ruling administration can come up with a good idea, according to them. And how very sad that approach is. And I challenge them. I challenge all of them to think about that process and consider being a bit more inclusive of ideas that may actually help services, and you might even get some credit for. Now, let me turn, Chairman, also now to our proposal to adjust the green bin charge down to £48 per bin for the next year. In January, this ruling Conservative executive told people there would be a cancellation of one collection of the green bin, and they couldn't possibly give a refund of just under £2, as the administration to do so would be simply wasn't worth the effort. I read that in the press. I think it came from Councillor Hilary Cole. And the fact of the matter is you took that money from people without giving the service. And we are now saying, okay, you had administrative challenges. So if you reduce it to £48 in the year to come, you'll have given them the £2 back with virtually no administration effort whatsoever.
Point of order. Councillor
Cole
mentioned my name erroneously. Has had no comment to make on green bin refunds whatsoever.
I will withdraw that. I certainly saw it from a Conservative member. Forgive me, Councillor Cole, if it wasn't you. And I'm very happy to look up who it was.
Okay.
So basically, we are looking to give them that money back next year. Very simple, very easy to do. I think it's Councillor Ardegh Walter going to confess to that, isn't he? Yes. Sorry, Councillor Cole. Now, as I said, if you won't support this amendment, then you know what you will have done. You'll have taken money under false pretenses, despite the small print in your terms and conditions. And the council has form in this area, because I will not forget the unlawful fines of people who drove over the Parkway Bridge some years ago. No refunds were given on those fines. All too difficult, we were told. Don't get yourself a
point of order,
reputation. Don't get yourself a reputation of taking money under false pretenses, Chairman.
Point of
order, Councillor Ardegh Walter.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Brooks is referring to the small print in the regulations. I think I quoted certainly the spirit of his meaning accurately. The small print, which we quoted very extensively at the time, do say that we cannot guarantee the service. And indeed, as he should know, we did not collect any green waste. We offered to collect extra bags of green waste after suspension for a short period during the worst period of the COVID crisis. There is no reduction.
With respect, he's eating into my time, and
he is right. Okay, you made the point. You made the point. Okay, you'll get a few extra seconds, Councillor Brooks.
Oh yes, thank you very much. So basically, I'm asking through this, we are asking that you actually give them back the £2 through a £48 charge in the year ahead. Very simple to do, 46k, and a statement of intent that says we're not going to take money and not give the service. Now, we also we do appreciate that there's £150,000 in this budget for town centre plans. We want to extend that to Thiel, Hungerford, Lambourne, and so we add another £150,000 in, because we don't want those rural areas, some of them, rural areas, not just fixated on the urban areas, Councillor McKinnon and Councillor Law and others who mentioned it. We want to see those areas helped. But, and here's the thing. Sadly, Chairman, until the ruling group starts listening and being a bit more inclusive and flexible, the term customer first will remain just a clever sounding slogan rather than a key part of the council's desire to deliver very good services to our residents. So in conclusion on this amendment, we have put forward a range of things to improve the budget proposals. They're affordable and appropriate at this difficult time. They assist people who have been hard hit by the pandemic. Several of them would not be difficult to take on board, but the process is flawed. They deserve to be properly considered, each on its merits, and I put them to this Zoom chamber for consideration. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. And I didn't want to interrupt you once you'd started, but does that find a seconder?
I'll say no now. No, yes, Mr. Chairman.
Right, well, thank you, Councillor. Do I take it you want to reserve your rights?
Yeah, reserve my rights.
Yes, okay, right. I have Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Brooks, for your proposed amendments. I will come to the process piece, but first of all, I just wanted to talk about the amendments themselves. I'll start by saying that I am concerned that 21 individual amendments are presented before us this evening, which, although you yourself have stated and your paper states are financially modest, they actually equate to 1.2 million of additional revenue. I'm sure that the residents of West Berkshire would not consider an increase from 1.99% of council tax to 3.2% a modest increase. I see from your paper that you are suggesting this could all be taken from reserves or from existing budgets. Yet what you failed to tell me is what you would cut out of the existing budget to make this possible, or how, if from reserves, this would be paid for in future years. You will have heard me talk earlier about the importance of a fair and balanced budget in our MTFS that considers future risks, yet I do not see any of this taken into account with these amendments. I have no intention of talking through all 21 amendments, and I am actually sure there are some potentially good ideas within them. However, they are exactly that, ideas, all of which will need to be looked at for feasibility and for fit within existing strategies. In relation to the proposals detailed, at item I regarding the deletion of an enforcement officer, our group had already picked up on this point, and I can confirm that there will be no reduction in the number of planning enforcement officers in the council's planning service. We will reallocate resources within planning to ensure the service priorities, such as enforcement, are met. I believe the head of planning will be speaking to this point at the District Parish Council next week, but thank you for highlighting it to us. It would be unreasonable for you to expect me to stand before you this evening and make a decision based on what little information we have before us. Now, while we have heard that your members are happy to muddle through and some are tired of fiscal responsibility, we are not. And if I made such a decision as to accept your amendments within council this evening, you would rightly scrutinise those at a later point. They need checking for feasibility. However, I don't think we are infallible, and therefore I have asked that in the substantive revenue proposal this evening, the relevant portfolio holders will pick up on the individual items that they feel worthy of further investigation. You have known for a year that proposals will be asked for at this evening's meeting, and yet these suggestions have not been socialised or taken forward through the normal process. You may only have seen our budget proposals for 3 weeks, but that does not mean you could not have been working on your own ideas over the course of the year and submitting ideas in the interim to the relevant areas to be considered. I've often heard my portfolio holders offer to have conversations and discussions directly with your portfolio holders if they wanted to take something forward. It would be interesting to know if any of your portfolio holders had taken up those offers. Therefore, I will be recommending voting against these amendments and will leave with the relevant portfolio holders to decide if there are any amongst those 21 that they wish to progress and consider within the coming year. Now, just before I finish, with regard to the process of voting, I, as leader of the council, do not decide that. It is a constitutional process that is decided by this council. I was asked only this week if I would consider making a change to the constitution. My response to that was that change would have to be decided by the council. It is not within my gift to decide how that should operate. And I'm more than happy for the constitutional task group that have been looking at this to put forward their suggestions and proposals, and for every member in this chamber to have a view on those. So with that, I will say no more. I'm sure plenty of people have got some thoughts around your amendments, but I will be recommending that we do not accept them en bloc.
Right. Before I go any further, we have I have about 6 or 7 other members. It is 9:45. We have only 45 minutes to conduct this business and to approve a budget. Whilst I wouldn't want to foreshorten debate, I need first of all a proposal that we go beyond 10 o'clock.
Chairman, I was just going to speak to make that proposal if it finds a seconder.
Does it find a seconder? Are we in favour? A show of hands, I think, is adequate. But 10:30 is the absolute guillotine. I need focused minds, please. Not being cheeky to you, but Councillor Marsh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll speak for 30 seconds now, and then I'd like to just say a few words in a moment about our amendments. Just to
no, you'll come to your amendments, Councillor.
Yes, just to say broadly that we support Councillor Brooks's amendments. Ironically, the only one that we don't like is the rather unnecessary refund, as it were, for the uncollected bin, because as Councillor Arder-Walter says, people were given bags. I think this is a lot of money to spend on really meeting a need that isn't there. I've had no complaints from anyone about the 1 week or 2 weeks that they didn't get collected. But having said that, for the reasons that Councillor Brooks has said, we have to vote on all these things, and given that we like most of them, we're going to vote for them. And I think that's the only approach we can take in the light of the problems that have been highlighted. And I do share Councillor Brooks's concerns about the process. And I think what the council leader hasn't said is that her deputy was very constructive about this, and we had quite a lot of discussions about it. And he even came up with a compromise, which we thought as opposition parties we could work with, and you vetoed it. He came and said to you, I'm sorry, Lynn won't buy it. So, and maybe, there was a compromise which would have involved sacrifices on our part, because we would have had the opportunity to put fewer amendments, but we would have had a proper debate and a vote on them, and this meeting would be finished by now, instead of dragging on until God knows when. So it's a real shame, and we will explore that through the constitutional group. And I hope that with Councillor Bridgman's excellent chairmanship of that group, that we can make some progress with it and to come up with a better process for next year.
Chairman, may I make a point of personal explanation?
Go on then.
I do apologise. I know this meeting is dragging on. I do apologise, but I do think I have to speak. Chairman, I sought to find a way that conversations in the Constitution Task Group can be taken forward. Councillor Doherty made an absolutely valid point, which on reflection, I completely understand that it is for council to make those decisions. I would also make the point that if tonight we had voted individually on 21 Liberal Democrat amendments to the revenue budget, let alone Green amendments to both the capital and revenue budget and Liberal Democrat amendments to the capital budget, we would be taking rather a long time on those amendments. I hope there is a way forward, but that needs a lot more discussion than we've been able to have to get to this point.
Thank you. And tonight, dare I say, is not the time for that discussion. If this needs resolving, it has a strength of feeling, can it be resolved outside this meeting, please? I'm going to keep going through the list. I urge you to be as brief as possible, Councillor Tony Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Amendments I and J are designed to boost public confidence in the planning system. With the dreadful planning white paper hanging over their heads, both planning professionals in councils with planning powers and lay parish councillors representing their communities could be excused for having low morale. But now is not the time to be cutting a post in planning enforcement. Although enforcement of planning decisions is somewhat surprisingly not a statutory duty, failing to resource the function undoubtedly is a factor in the low opinion that many parish councillors and residents in general have of our planning system.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Councillor Law, I think you're going to make the point that I would love to make.
Yes, I think this point's been addressed by the leader already.
So do I.
Specifically, as we're short of time, why
correct?
Yeah, it's irrelevant. Thank you.
I think, Councillor Vickers, that if you have another point, but the enforcement officer has been covered by the leader's comments.
I'm sorry. So I'm not allowed to quote from a resident letter that I got last week, which is asked me to share with colleagues about the state of the planning service. I don't see why. Just
if it's relevant to your budget, then please do.
It is speaking to the budget.
Okay.
Have I missed something? As the leader said, we're not going to cut this post?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm very pleased about that. Sorry, I must have been, I very much apologise for not paying attention.
Well, that's the point that Councillor Law was making as a point of order. But if there's another point you wish to raise, I wouldn't wish your debate.
Well, I would just like to make the general point that I think we need to involve parish councils much more in the planning system. They are on side and they are disillusioned. And some of the comments that came in this letter, I think, deserve to be shared. I don't know who this person is. Probably they're somewhere in the Western area because they clearly know me personally and that's why they wrote to me. But it's from somebody who says they're a long-standing parish councillor whose inclination is conservative, that is with a small c. I'm increasingly dismayed, he or she says, by the way the planning system is conducted in West Berks. The deceitful try it on, tell lies, hoping for and often getting retrospective consent. No wonder people have a bad experience and have lost faith in it, because over the years, we have been let down by the tardiness and emasculation.
Point of order again, please, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Law, I will take your point of order.
Yes, this is a comments about the planning service.
It is.
Nothing to do with the amendments to the budget.
Well, part of my amendment to the budget, of the amendments I'm speaking to, are the restoration of the neighbourhood letters. Has that also been withdrawn by the leader? Have I missed that one as well? Has the point that Councillor Abbs put up in one of our amendments? I think it was where are we now? F, viable villages. That parish councils should be helped in the planning system more to come up with neighbourhood planning. Basically, that's what's behind viable villages. Having a professional help the local communities understand how the changing environment, post-COVID, post-Brexit, with the changing in working practices, can help them understand the changes that they need in their villages. So I would like to take this opportunity to make that general point. But I'll move away from the planning service to save time, and again thanking the leader for withdrawing that withdrawal of the post. Turning to transport and highways now, we prioritise public safety in our amendments G and K. On speed reviews, I know that at least one influential member of the administration supports this. It does need more resource if we're going to actually have more speed limit reviews, which there's a wide support for. As for active travel support for schools, most of the school travel plans we have are 10 years old, and they are thanks to the hard work of an excellent school travel plans officer. Again, with changing environment and increased priority for active travel, surely we need to prioritise it amongst our young people, and we need to bring back that post for a few years in order to make it happen, because it won't otherwise with the hard-pressed school leaders that we've got. So I will close my remarks there and let others have a say. Thank you, Chairman.
Right.
Chairman, can I come in?
Mr. Chairman, can I, point of order as well, please.
Go on, Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, so it's just a genuine question. What happens if we don't get through debate? Because
we have to get through debate tonight, or we don't set a budget.
Chairman,
but do we not?
That point.
Sorry, Councillor Law, I'm addressing the chairman.
Yes.
So I mean, unless we pass a motion to change everyone's speaking rights down to a minute, we're just not going to get through it all. And members were told how long they had to speak. I don't think anyone's breached that speaking limit or even got particularly close to it yet we're still rapidly running out of time. And it feels unfair that members are being rushed through their careful deliberations and remarks because of an arbitrary time limit.
I'm going to ask, right.
Chairman, may
Councillor
I?
Law, go on, Councillor Law.
Yes, I'm sympathetic to Councillor Dillon's points, but I am time, and I think we fully understand the arguments that have been made so far. So may I propose that the motion be put?
Does that find a seconder?
I'll second that, Chairman.
Right. What the procedure, if this this has to now go to the vote, depending on the way the vote goes, if it's a vote in favour, the seconder who has not already spoken can speak.
Chairman, as a point of order, sir.
Go on, Councillor Brooks.
Truncating debate on the most important.
Jeff, just let them do it. They know what they're playing at. Just let the vote happen, Jeff.
You are not allowing people to have a debate, and this is what you're doing.
Right, I would love to allow.
Here, you are closing down debate. Shame on you all.
Right, the point.
Here.
The point I am going to make, although that point is very much at my discretion, is, and I'm not allowing you more points of order at this time, we have literally just over half an hour. We need to set a budget for this evening. Members, I'm sorry, with no disrespect, some speeches have been slightly longer than others, although no one has exceeded the time. But as I say, we are on a bound. We must set a budget. The Constitution says that the absolute guillotine is 10:30. I do not want to foreshorten debate. I would love you all to have a brief 30 seconds of debate. The trouble is that hasn't just happened, has it? So,
Chairman, would you allow me to sum up my amendment, please?
You will get the opportunity to do so.
You will not take any more speakers, but I surely should be able to sum up my amendment, please.
You will. Well, I was trying to explain to you, and I appreciate this is contentious. Everyone has prepared a speech. The trouble is I've got 7 members there. Even if you only take 3 minutes each, we're running out of time. That is the dilemma that I have. So at the close of the amendment, the relevant chairman of the committee, sorry, the executive member, if not already spoken, sorry, I beg your pardon, the mover of the amendment, which is you, Councillor Brooks, the mover then of the original motion, which is you, which is then Councillor McKinnon. So you will have the opportunity of coming back. But as I said, I've got 5 people now with hands up. We will run out of time. We will not set a budget and we will be in dire straits. Mrs. Clark, is there anything you wish to add to what I've just said?
No, Chairman, that the proposal that the question be put has been moved and seconded. The Constitution states that this now goes to a vote if you are satisfied that there has been sufficient debate.
It hasn't been voted on, Chairman.
No, it hasn't yet, and that's the point I'm coming to. I'm seeking further advice.
So yes, so I will ask each of the leaders to give an indication of their group, and I will ask members if they wish to dissent. And then then Chairman, as you have outlined, it will then go to the close of debate provisions, which means on an amendment, it is as you have outlined, the executive member or chairman, if they've not already spoken, the mover of the amendment and the mover of the original motion.
Right. Thank you. We'll go to the vote. I had not forgotten that point.
Is the motion allowed to be debated, Chairman? No, is it?
No.
Not at this stage, because we will run out of time and we must set a budget tonight. I've been trying to be as efficient with time as possible. Let's not waste any more on it. Please, Mrs. Clark, would you go to the leaders?
So, Councillor Doherty, on behalf of the Conservative group.
Reluctantly, yes, because we need to set a budget this evening.
Councillor Dillon, on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group.
Absolutely not. A travesty of debate and justice.
Yeah.
Councillor Culver, on behalf of the Green Party.
No, I agree with Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Chairman. That closure motion has been carried. So we now move to
Chairman, are there any people who would have wanted to?
Oh, apologies. My apologies,
yes.
Councillor
Thank
Brooks.
You.
So Are there any members who wish to disagree with the manner in which their leader, the group leader, has indicated? Sorry, I can see a number of hands up. They are members of the Liberal Democrat group, and I assume they are old hands in relation to the substantive amendment rather than indicating. So thank you, Chairman. Then that closure motion has been carried. So we now move to the close of debate provisions.
Which is the mover of the amendment, which is Councillor Brooks.
Yes, Chairman.
I'm allowed to.
You are.
Is that right?
You are.
Thank you. I don't think my seconder got an opportunity to speak, even though he reserved his right.
And I'm the leader of the opposition.
Mrs. Clark.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not provided for in the Constitution.
What I'm finding is that this Constitution seems to have changed over the years. That, Chairman, you have less latitude than you used to have when you chaired the council some many years ago. Councillor Doherty has talked about the constitutional process, but you knew 12 months ago, Councillor Doherty, that we wanted this to be looked at. It was looked at 2 weeks ago, and suddenly the Constitution had to be changed. The chairman used to have a great deal of latitude to say, this is how I will take this. And for Councillor Bridgman, no, we wouldn't put 21 amendments one after the other serially. We would have got what they do in lots of other councils and Parliament. We've got a little heads up saying that 2 or 3 might find favour.
Point of order.
And the rest will fall on block.
Councillor Law, a point of order.
Councillor Law, before your next point of order. I'm moving off this now.
Okay.
Well, let's look at where this money is coming from, Councillor Doherty. It's coming from underspend. You are £3.4 million underspend now. I suspect you'll be £4 million underspent by the end of the financial year. This money is available for our amendments. So when you talk about strategies, should we work them up during the year? I want you to think of 2 things. One, you have all of the officer cadre, every officer and staff member at your disposal. We do not. We have 3 days a week of a group support officer and some help from officers at their discretion, and it's rather good, but it ain't enough. And furthermore, if you want these strategies all discussed before we put amendments down, what's the point of us putting amendments down? Because you're saying they haven't been thought through. £4,000 to freeze the adult social care cost fees doesn't have to have a lot of thinking through. You could spend £4,000 on officer time thinking about it, and it will cost twice as much. You talk about my using the word muddle through earlier. It was a sardonic comment, Councillor McKinnon. It was a little bit sarcasm at me.
They don't do sarcasm.
Through, as in we didn't need an MTFS. The place ran darn well for all those years. And we're not tired of talking about finances and financial prudence. So don't put words in our mouth. There are 21 separate proposals here. 3 or 4 of them could easily have found favour and not cost very much. But your dogmatic approach to this, and now you curtailing debate, is disgraceful. I'm going to finish, but I think my leader then wants to say what we will do next.
And before I turn to Councillor McKinnon, who I hope will be incredibly brief, Councillor Brooks, as you made a comment about me, I'm going to respond to you and say that I would love to let every member speak. Our constitution does not allow us to go beyond 10:30. We have to set a budget. Those 2 things do not happen if I allow everybody to speak. So I am under pressure to ensure that the budget is set. I have great sympathy with those who have established what they wish to say and haven't had the opportunity. So I'm going to, without wasting any more time, Councillor McKinnon, I hope you can be brief in your summing up.
Very brief, Chairman. I have nothing to add.
Oh, okay. Mrs. Clark, can I ask you to go to the leader of each group?
So I will go to the leader of each group in relation to the proposed amendment. So Councillor Lynn Doherty.
Against.
Councillor Lee Dillon.
For.
Councillor Caroline Culver.
For.
Does any member wish to?
Chairman, I do apologise to raise a point of order whilst Mrs. Clark is in the middle of taking the vote. I do apologise.
Sure it's essential,
but it is important. I have been looking at the close of debate rules in the Constitution, and I would just like to take Mrs. Clark's advice, because one of the things that is said about close of debate on original substantive motion, and I'm taking it that an amendment is such a beast, that the undermentioned shall have the right of speech or reply in the following order. The seconder, if they have not already spoken. And I was conscious that Councillor Dillon was seconder and had reserved his right.
Yes, and if you continue to read down that certain provision, that's at 4:13:15 of the Constitution. It states where an amendment has been moved, the undermentioned shall have the right of speech or reply at the close of debates on the amendments in the following order.
I bow to your superior knowledge of the Constitution, Mrs. Clark, and I apologise to the council for having interrupted.
Can we get on with it?
We do need to get on with it, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen.
So can I just?
Yes, please.
I'm just checking that anybody wishes to vote, then it indicates a different vote to that indicated by their lead. I can see Councillor Vickers still has his hand raised. Yeah, so I'll take that as. So that proposed amendment has been rejected.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Go on, Councillor Dillon.
I know I didn't have my right to speak, and our amendment was lectured to by the leader. I proposed that when Councillor Law that the motion now be put, I said that we could table an amendment on speaking rights. The leader of council reluctantly agreed to move the motion without allowing any further debate after debate had been prepped and agreed, and no one had gone outside their speaking limits. I am in no way willing to take part any further in this meeting. And so I'm going to leave the chamber, and I would like my group to leave with me. We haven't had our voices heard. We are democratically elected representatives of West Berkshire wards on the biggest biggest council meeting of the night, and you have silenced us. So I will silence you and I will leave the meeting. Good night, Mr. Chairman. Disgrace.
I second Councillor Dillon will be leaving as well. Good evening.
Good evening. So I take it then the Green Party amendment will not now be debated. I then turn to the main motion.
Point of order, Chairman.
Yes, go on.
I think there's probably more constitutionally aware people than I am, but I think as the amendment has been on the papers, it has to be at least voted on.
That's an interesting point. I've never been in this position before, Mrs. Clark.
So unless a member wishes to move that amendment, and then it would need to find a seconder, and it was submitted on behalf of the Green Party. So I don't know whether you wish to invite, but I think if it's not moved and seconded, it won't be voted on.
Okay, I wasn't trying to gloss over it. Is there any, all right, the Green Party amendment, is there anyone wishing to propose it? No, in that case, we will move on to the main debate. Councillor McKinnon, you've already had your 10 minutes. Does anyone else wish to speak at this time? No?
Okay, sorry, Chairman, I could see Councillor Sumner, Doherty,
oh, they
and
have.
Jones.
They suddenly popped up. Councillor Sumner.
Chairman, thank you. Unusual circumstances.
Very.
I would just like it recorded. I just want something down for record that I was going to offer members of the opposition the opportunity to discuss those matters that relate to transport and countryside during a transport advisory group. Clearly there are none here. Well, Councillor Martha Vickers look like she may still be online, but there are no others online. So I want it in the minutes recorded that I've made that offer, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor, sorry, who have I got there? We're jumping around. Councillor Rick Jones. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. The audience is obviously reduced recently, but I would like to commend the strong financial management of the council and this administration to produce such a positive budget in the current circumstances. By protecting frontline services, this budget benefits my ward in a very impressive way. And the residents, as the feedback that I get, are very favourable to the council, particularly on the spending on schools, leisure, highways, high quality waste and countryside services and social care, and particularly the council's emergency planning team, who really supported my ward in the flooding crisis of January and February this year. The Searle Community Fund helps with fitness and leisure facilities, especially important in this particular circumstance. And the investment in council strategy for community support and engagement helps my community's resilience, and particularly the partnership with the voluntary sector. So I think the budget both continues the good work and provides investment to improve the quality of life in my area, and I commend it to the council.
Right, thank you, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, we have less than 20 minutes left, so please, if you wish to make your points, if you could be very brief, I'd be grateful. Councillor Alderwater.
Thank you, Chairman. And again, on points referencing the environment, as I was going to respond to Councillor Abbs's now departed amendments, I welcome the chance to build on and recognise the need to build on the efforts we are so far announcing for this year. We have flexibility in the budget to respond in this year, and I look forward to more work progressing on our environment strategy over the coming years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll focus on my responses to the amendments. I'll be as quick as I can. Both opposition parties have called for support for a youth worker. It's not clear to me what particular services are wanted, and I'll happily discuss this on a further occasion with the opposition. But there's been a big shift in the way that youth services have been funded, and I am very keen with officers to undertake a review of what we do in that particular area for discussion later on. There's been a call for giving relief from council tax to care leavers. Council already has a duty of care, a duty to care leavers until they reach 25, and we maintain strong links with them after that, after the age of 18, if they wish. In the event that one of our young people find themselves in the position where they're liable for council tax, yet are unable to afford it, there are already ways that council can support them. But Berkshire Maestros, I'm going to talk to Councillor Patton about that if he would like to take up my offer to meet. Finally, we'll be announcing exciting news about holiday activities programme for our children. Government is providing substantial funding for this in the Easter and summer breaks. The Easter programme is substantively in place, and we want to deliver the summer programme in partnership with schools and local organisations, and I will make sure that the Corn Exchange has the opportunity to participate in this programme if they wish. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Bridgman.
Chairman, very quickly. Firstly, it is disappointing that the opposition groups have left the chamber, most of them. Because, of course, we are governed by the Constitution. I want to make this point for public consumption, that the Constitution has limits within it. We have to conclude meetings by 10:30.
Yeah.
And unless we sometimes guillotine debate, that just isn't going to happen. And we have an absolute legal obligation to set a budget. And there is no getting away from that. The thing I would have said in debate, perhaps I'd have said a little more than this, but I do want anyone watching this, the press, the public, to reflect with me that one of the reasons that we are in the position we are, that we can set a balanced budget with only a 1.99% increase in council tax, is the regrettable deaths of some of our residents. That has affected, as was said earlier in the meeting, has affected the adult social care budget. It's not a position I would have liked to have been in, but it is a position we find ourselves in. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman. You actually said what I was. Sorry, Councillor Law.
Yes, sorry, Chairman. May I propose that the motion be put, because we're running out of time.
Well, I was about to get to the vote anyway, and that no one else had indicated. So that would still not preclude seconders and others talking. So if you just
I was going to say, I won't use what the speech that I'd prepared, as I recognise that the leader of the opposition isn't able to use his, so I don't intend to use that. I would echo Councillor Bridgman's word that it's disappointing that the opposition have chosen to leave. They know we have a legal obligation to the residents of West Berkshire, and actually if we want to work cross-party, we all have to fulfil that legal obligation to our residents first and foremost. So it's very disappointing that they've left. It's a shame that the Constitution has to work in this way, but they are the rules with which we are working. So I would commend this budget to you. It's actually the best budget that I have ever seen, and it's a shame that we have 21 amendments tabled where actually there's so many positive things within this budget that it would be good to focus on and really look at what that means to our residents going forward, not only as we deliver our council strategy, but as they recover from COVID. And this budget is all about our recovery process from COVID and supporting our residents through the turbulent years ahead of us. So I commend this budget to you. I'm not using the prepared stuff, but I do commend the budget to you.
Councillor McKinnon, you have the opportunity of the last word if you need to add anything.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Bridgman covered much of what I would say. It's a very unusual setting this for a revenue budget. It's not the administration curtailing debate, it's the clock curtailing debate. I'm afraid there's no getting away from that. There was no indication that the opposition were going to fall on the side of brevity. There were 7 hands up, despite your very polite requests. And Councillor Vickers was reading from his correspondence. That's why closure motions exist, I'm afraid. And what we've seen tonight, I think, doesn't reflect very well on the opposition, sadly. But I'll leave my comments there. I'm very pleased and very proud with this budget. And I hope that the council votes in favour of it.
Right, thank you for that. And it saddens me immensely as well. I was doing my utmost to ensure that people had their opportunity. As you rightly say, when you start getting letters read out, it does make my life very difficult too. I turn now to Mrs. Clark. Could you take us through, presumably, the abbreviated list?
Yes, so I intend to call out the names of all members who are still in this Zoom meeting and ask them to indicate for, against or abstain. So if all members could unmute their microphones. So Councillor Steve Ardar-Walter.
For.
Councillor Peter Argyle.
For.
Councillor Jeff Beck. I can come back.
For.
Thank you.
All right.
Councillor Dennis Bennyworth. Sorry, did I? Councillor Bennyworth.
That was 4.
Thank you. Councillor Dominic Bowick.
4.
Councillor Graham Bridgman.
4.
Councillor Jeff Cant.
4.
Councillor Hilary Cole.
4.
Councillor James Cole.
4.
Councillor Lynn Doherty.
4.
Councillor Clive Hooker.
4.
Councillor Gareth Hurley.
Oh, no, sorry, I was on mute. 4.
Councillor Rick Jones.
4.
Councillor Alan Law.
4.
Councillor Tony London.
4.
Councillor Ross McKinnon.
4.
Councillor Tom Marino.
4.
Councillor Jeff Mays.
Abstain.
Councillor Graham Pask.
4.
Councillor Garth Simpson.
4.
Councillor Richard Somner.
4.
Councillor Joanne Stewart.
4.
Councillor Martha Vickers.
Left.
Councillor, thank you. Councillor Andy Williamson.
4.
Councillor Howard Wollaston.
4.
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that the motion has been carried.
Thank you. We have 10 minutes left. We get to item 19, the Statutory Policy Statement 2021. Councillor Stewart.
I take it you want me to be brief. So I
yes, please.
Everything, but I would like to propose this paper and the recommendation to seek Council's approval of the Statutory Pay Policy Statement for publication from the 1st of April 2021 with amendments as noted.
Thank you. Is that seconded?
Yes, I second that.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
I just want to make sure that we are very clear on the amendment, because I think in the paper that was circulated, there was an error in the paragraph numbers that were stated. So if we can just minute that it was 3.1.23 and 3.1.24. What I do want to say, particularly after what has happened so far in the meeting, is that this paper has been reviewed by Corporate Board, Operations Board and the Personnel Committee, which is a cross-party committee, and the recommendation is for this to be approved by full council. My colleagues who are no longer in the meeting, we did debate this, or some of my colleagues, we did debate this particular statement, and we actually had some amendments made to it. So I think to tighten it up, to make sure that oversight was really tight. And I just wanted to make mention that one of those was around approvals for additional payments, to make sure that we are really, really clear that delegated authorities are met whenever those are planned. I'm going to leave it there because I don't think there's much more that I can say.
Right. Is there anyone else wishing to add to this? Councillor Simpson, do you wish to add anything? As I
don't wish to add anything. It was a good.
Right. Thank you. Technically, I'll come back to you, Councillor Stewart. Anything else?
No, that's it from me. Thank you, Chair.
In that case, I ask Mrs. Clark to take us through the vote.
Thank you, Chairman. So we are going to do a name vote. So I will again do the foreshortened list of members currently in the meeting. So Councillor Steve Ardar-Walter.
For.
Councillor Peter Argyle.
That's better. I've unmuted myself. For.
Thank you. Councillor Jeff Beck.
For.
Councillor Dennis Bennyworth.
For.
Councillor Dominic Bowick.
For.
Councillor Graham Bridgman.
For.
Councillor Jeff Cant.
For.
Councillor Hilary Cole.
For.
Councillor James Cole.
For.
Councillor Lynn Doherty.
For.
Councillor Clive Hooker.
For.
Councillor Gareth Hurley.
For.
Councillor Rick Jones.
For.
Councillor Alan Law.
For.
Councillor Tony Linden.
For.
Councillor Ross McKinnon.
For.
Councillor Tom Marino.
For.
Councillor Graham Pask.
For.
Sorry, can I just check? Is Councillor Jeff Mays, has he left the meeting?
No, I'm still here.
Apologies, Councillor Mays. Thank you. So Councillor Claire Rolls.
For.
Councillor Garth Simpson.
For.
Councillor Richard Sumner.
For.
Councillor Joanne Stewart.
For.
Councillor Andy Williamson.
For.
Councillor Howard Wollaston.
For.
Thank you, Chairman. I confirm that that motion has been carried.
Okay, right. We've got, sorry to keep clock watching. We've got 7 minutes by my reckonings. 20-member development programme, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to propose Council to consider the proposed draft member development programme and ensuing resource implications, and to approve the programme for the 2021 municipal year.
Thank you. Does that find a seconder? A muted Clive Hooker, I think.
Thank you. I'd like to second that, Chairman. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chairman. A foreshortened message. Again, this particular programme has been developed as part of a cross-party development group, and the proposed content has also been approved by Corporate Board. This programme is draft. It is one of those programmes that is ever-changing. We can make sure that we include training sessions that must happen, but there also needs to be flexibility so that we can adapt and include more as we need them. There is also a provision, and we ask the Council to approve a £5,000 to be set aside from corporate training budget to fund any external training agreed by members. I'm going to stop there, I think, Chairman, and then anybody can ask any questions if they need to.
That's helpful. Any questions or comments from members? Councillor Hooker, is there anything you wish to add?
The programme set out, Chairman, in Appendix C of our agenda, and I just asked members to support the recommendation before council this evening. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stewart, anything else to add?
I did want to, as we've got literally a couple of seconds, make a note of the achievement of the teams involved in developing and delivering training sessions in 2020. I think it's very important that we note that they have had to make use of technology to deliver these sessions that had been so far relatively untested. It's a great testament to our officers that when difficult circumstances come along, they rise to the challenge and they find a way to deliver anyway. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Mrs. Clark, can you take us rapidly through the vote, please?
Indeed, Chairman. So, Councillor, if all members could unmute themselves again, apologies, and indicate for, against or abstain. So, Councillor Steve Ardell-Walter.
For.
Councillor Peter Argyle.
For.
Councillor Jeff Beck.
For.
Councillor Dennis Bennyworth.
For.
Councillor Dominic Bowick.
For.
Councillor Graham Bridgman.
For.
Councillor Jeff Cant.
For.
Councillor Hilary Cole.
For.
Councillor James Cole.
For.
Councillor Lynn Doherty.
For.
Councillor Clive Hooker.
For.
Councillor Gareth Hurley.
For.
Councillor Rick Jones.
For.
Councillor Alan Law.
For.
Councillor Tony Linden.
For.
Councillor Ross McKinnon.
For.
Councillor Tom Marino.
For.
Councillor Jeff Mays.
Abstain.
Councillor Graham Pask.
For.
Councillor Claire Rolls. Councillor Garth Simpson.
For. Sorry, for. Sorry, I couldn't unmute quick enough.
Sorry. So Councillor Garth Simpson.
Yes, for.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Sumner.
For.
Councillor Joanne Stewart.
For.
Councillor Andy Williamson.
For.
And Councillor Howard Wollaston.
For.
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that that motion has been carried.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark. Right, item 21, response to the proposed fireworks motion. With only 3 minutes remaining, I am going to propose that this is deferred to the next meeting, which annual meeting, of course, which will be July, which is well in time for the fireworks season. Right, I saw my leader shaking her head.
Apologies, I thought the next meeting was May, but I understand it can't be done at the AGM.
It is, and we can't do it at that. So the next proper meeting that we can discuss this at is July. When it comes to the notice of motion, public funds for public access, I need to ask Mrs. Clark what the procedure is in that the person who wishes to move this motion isn't here. Can I refer it to where I was going to suggest it be referred to, or does he need to present it first? That's a dilemma.
Yeah, so it would need to be moved and seconded. So I would suggest if it's deferred to the next meeting, and Councillor Vickers can confirm whether he wishes to submit it at that meeting for consideration.
That's ideal. And item 23, finally, members' questions will receive written answers. Right. So with that, members, may I say to those of you left, thank you. Thank you. It's been a long, lengthy meeting. It's been quite a tricky meeting in terms of time management. But I'm going to bid you good night. Thank you for setting the budget. That was the legal requirement that we had to do. Thank you for the good-natured debate. With that.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
And thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Mays.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mays.
Thank you, Councillor Mays.
Thank you, Councillor Mays.
I wanted to watch you, see what you're doing.
You're
welcome.
Quite right. I can report back now.
Well done, Jeb.
I remind all panellists the meeting is still live until the chairman closes it.
I'm sorry, I formally closed.